Settle in and get comfortable. This is a quiet story with no music, just words you can listen to as you drift off. If you'd like, close your eyes and let the sentences move at an even, gentle pace. Picture a warm little workshop before the city has fully woken. Pale morning light spills through a narrow window, and in that light a fine veil of wood dust turns slowly in the air. It smells of cedar and olive wood, with the faintest trace of oil used to care for tools. Somewhere close by, almost too softly to notice, wood shavings whisper as they curl, thin and light as a dry leaf. Beyond the wall, a great city lives, breathing low and far away. Water sellers call out their prices, someone's dishes clink, footsteps and hooves tap across stone. But here, inside the workshop, every sound seems softened, as if the wood itself knows how to take in noise and lay it down gently. On the work table lie familiar tools, simple ones, well used, their handles darkened by time and hands. They feel good to hold, warm in a way only long-known things can be. And yet, in the quiet of this morning, there's a subtle weight in the air. Not panic, not fear, just the sense that today asks for a choice. In a pocket, there is only one coin, the last one. Even through cloth, it seems to cool the fingertips, and that small chill makes the thoughts feel clearer. Sometimes an entire life can narrow to something this small, to its weight, its faint ring, the way it rests in the palm. And there is a small pouch as well, tied with a thin cord. Inside, besides the coin, hides something smooth and pale to the touch, like polished bone, like a sliver of ivory, an object that should not be here, an object that might open a door, or close it forever. And now, as the city wakes and the morning light spreads across the table, it's time to begin. Chapter 1. The Woodcarver's Last Coin and the Ivory Key. In the days when Baghdad still shimmered like a jewel set between the twin rivers, when the markets rang with 100 tongues and the minarets called faithful and faithless alike to contemplate the turning of the world, there lived a woodcarver named Yusuf ibn Tariq. He was not rich, nor was he particularly poor, or at least, he had not been poor until the season when fortune turned her face away and left him standing in the shadow. Yusuf's workshop stood in the street of the woodworkers, a narrow lane that wound between the old quarter and the newer districts where merchants built houses with painted courtyards and fountains that sang at dusk. His shop was small but well placed, with a window that caught the morning light and a door that opened onto the sounds of the city waking, the sellers of water calling their prices, the clatter of donkey hooves on stone, the arguments of neighbors, the laughter of children who had not yet learned that hunger could silence joy. For 15 years, Yusuf had carved prayer beads in small chests, screens for the wealthy and spoons for the common. His hands knew the grain of cedar and olive wood, the way sandalwood released its scent beneath the blade, the stubborn resistance of ebony. He was known as a man who worked with care, who did not hurry, and who could, when pressed, produce beauty. But beauty, he had learned, does not always pay the rent. The trouble had begun small, as troubles often do. A merchant who commissioned a decorative panel for his daughter's wedding failed to pay in full, claiming the work was late, though it had not been. A shipment of rare wood, already purchased, was lost when the caravan carrying it was raided between Aleppo and Mosul. Yusuf had paid for the wood, but received only apologies and dust. Then came the slow season, when no one seemed to need the work of a woodcarver, when the people of Baghdad clutched their coins and spent only on bread and oil. One by one, Yusuf's savings dwindled. He sold a few tools, his second-best adze, a sharpening stone he had inherited from his father. He asked for extensions on the rent. He took commissions he would have refused in better times. Rough work, cheap work, repairs that paid little and earned him nothing in reputation. And then, because pride is a poor companion to an empty purse, he went to the moneylender. The moneylender's name was Al-Khattab, and he operated from a stall near the spice market, where the air was always thick with cinnamon and black pepper, as if to disguise the bitter taste of the transactions that took place there. Al-Khattab was a compact man with oiled hair and rings on every finger, and he smiled the way a snake might smile if snakes had learned the custom. "Ah, Yusuf the woodcarver," Al-Khattab had said when Yusuf first came to him 6 months prior. "A man of skill, they tell me, a man who carves beauty from dead trees. What a talent, and yet here you are." Yusuf had swallowed his pride and asked for a loan, a modest sum, enough to buy wood and pay his rent through the winter. Al-Khattab had agreed with an easiness that should have warned him. The terms had seemed fair, repayment in 4 months, with interest that was steep but not impossible. But 4 months became 6, and Yusuf had managed only half the repayment. Al-Khattab's smile had grown thinner, and now it was the 3rd day of the new moon, and Yusuf stood once more in the spice market, breathing pepper and dread, while Al-Khattab sat behind his low table and drummed his ringed fingers on the wood. "I have been patient," Al-Khattab said. His voice was soft, which somehow made it worse. "Patience is a virtue, they say, but virtue does not feed my children, Yusuf. Virtue does not pay for the roof over my head." "I know," Yusuf said. His throat was dry. "I have brought what I could." He placed a small pouch on the table. It was lighter than it should have been. Al-Khattab opened it without looking inside. He already knew it would not be enough. "This is half of what you owe for this month alone," he said. "And there is still the principal, and the interest that compounds like a vine in summer." "I will have the rest," Yusuf said. 2 more weeks. I have a commission. A wealthy widow wants a chest carved with verses from the poets. She will pay well." "Will she?" Al-Khattab tilted his head. "And when she delays, or when she quibbles over the price, or when she decides she wants something different, what then?" "No, Yusuf. I think we are past the time for promises." Yusuf felt the ground shift beneath him, as if the earth itself had grown unreliable. "I will pay," he said. "I give you my word." "Words," Al-Khattab said, "are not coins, and I am not a poet." He leaned forward. "You have until sunset today. If you do not bring me what you owe, principal, interest, and the penalty for lateness, then I will take your tools as collateral, all of them, your workbench, your stock, everything in that shop of yours, and if you still do not pay within the week, I will sell them." The words fell like stones into a well. "You cannot—" "I can," Al-Khattab said. "We signed a contract, Yusuf. You put your mark on it. The judge will uphold it. This is business, not charity. Sunset. Do not be late." He waved a hand, dismissing him. Yusuf walked back through the spice market in a daze. The sounds of the city seemed distant, muffled, as if he were hearing them through water. He thought of his tools, the chisels his father had given him, the saws he had saved for years to buy, the small curved blade he used for detail work, which fit his hand as if it had grown there. Without them, he was not a woodcarver. He was nothing. By the time he reached his shop, the sun had climbed to its zenith. He had perhaps 6 hours. He sat at his workbench and stared at the half-finished chest before him. It was a commission from a merchant who had already paid half in advance, but the rest would not come until the piece was complete, and completion was still days away. He thought of selling something else, but there was nothing left to sell. He thought of borrowing from a friend, but his friends were as poor as he was, or poorer. He put his head in his hands. It was then that he remembered the old trunk. It sat in the corner of his shop, beneath a tattered cloth. He had inherited it from his uncle, a man who had traveled widely in his youth and returned to Baghdad with a collection of odd tools, foreign coins, and bric-a-brac that had seemed valuable only in the way that old things sometimes do. Valuable in memory, not in silver. Yusuf had looked through the trunk once, years ago, and found nothing of worth. A few bent nails, a cracked mallet, a tangle of leather cords. But now, with desperation sharpening his vision, he thought, perhaps there is something I missed. Perhaps there is something I can sell. He pulled the trunk into the light and opened it. The smell of dust and old wood rose to meet him. He lifted out the bent nails, the mallet, a canvas roll that contained rusty tools. Beneath it all, wedged into a corner and wrapped in a scrap of faded silk, was something he did not remember seeing before. He unwrapped it carefully. It was a key, but not an ordinary key. It was carved from ivory, or something like ivory, smooth and dense and faintly golden, as if it had drunk sunlight and held it. The bow of the key was shaped like a lotus blossom, its petals layered in delicate whorls, and the shaft was incised with calligraphy so fine that Yusuf had to squint to make it out. The script was old, older than anything he recognized, flowing and angular at once, like the tracks of birds in sand. He turned it in his hand. It was cool to the touch and light, and there was something about the way it sat in his palm that made his breath catch. It felt, he did not have the words, it felt awake. He held it up to the window. The light passed through the ivory in places, revealing fine channels beneath the surface, as if the key were not carved but grown. And as he held it, he thought he felt the faintest pulse, like a heartbeat beneath his thumb. What door does this open? He wondered. For a moment, he forgot about Al-Khattab and the debt and the dying son. He turned the key over and over, tracing the calligraphy with his fingertip. The script seemed to shift under his gaze, the letters rearranging themselves, though surely that was only a trick of the light. He thought, this is worth something. Surely this is worth something. Ivory was valuable, and craftsmanship like this, whoever had made it, had been a master. Perhaps a wealthy collector would pay well for it, perhaps even enough to clear his debt. He wrapped the key carefully and tucked it into his sash. Then he locked the shop and went out into the city. The afternoon market was thick with bodies and noise. Yusuf moved through the press of merchants and beggars, past the sellers of copper pots and linen, past the scribes who sat beneath awnings and wrote letters for those who could not, past the old women selling charms against the evil eye. He was looking for a dealer in antiquities, a man he had heard of, who operated near the street of the booksellers. He found the shop wedged between a perfumer and a seller of astrolabes. It was narrow and dark, the kind of place that smelled of old paper and older secrets. The dealer was a thin man with a long face and eyes that missed nothing. "I have something to sell," Yusuf said, and unwrapped the key. The dealer took it without a word. He held it to the light, turned it, examined the calligraphy. His expression did not change. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "It was my uncle's." "And where did he get it?" "I don't know. He traveled. He collected things." The dealer set the key on the counter between them. "I cannot buy this," he said. Yusuf's stomach dropped. "Why not?" "Because I do not deal in curses." The word hung in the air like smoke. "It's a key," Yusuf said. "Just a key." "There is no such thing as just a key." The dealer pushed it back across the counter. "Look at the script. Do you know what it says?" "No, neither do I, but I recognize the style. It is older than the Caliphate, older than the Byzantines. This is a script used by those who bound spirits and wrote wards. Whatever door this opens, it is not one I would walk through." He folded his arms. "Take it to the sorcerers in the eastern quarter if you like, or throw it in the river, but do not bring it here." Yusuf took the key back, his hands trembling. He tried 2 more dealers, both refused. One would not even touch it. The other offered a single dirham. An insult. The sun was sinking. Yusuf returned to his shop with the key still in his sash and no money in his purse. The light was thick and golden, the kind of light that makes everything beautiful and sad at once. He stood in the doorway and looked at his tools, his workbench, the half-finished chest. He thought, "This is the last time I will see this place as mine." And then he heard the voices. They came from the alley behind the shop, low, rough voices, and the sound of footsteps. Yusuf's heart kicked in his chest. He moved to the back door and peered through a crack in the wood. 3 men stood in the alley. He recognized one of them, a thick-shouldered enforcer who worked for Al-Khattab. The other 2 were strangers, hard-eyed and armed with cudgels. "This is the place," the enforcer said. "The Woodcarver. Al-Khattab wants everything inside catalogued by nightfall. If he's still here, remove him." Yusuf did not wait to hear more. He grabbed his best chisel, his smallest saw, and the ivory key. He shoved them into a leather satchel, slung it over his shoulder, and slipped out the front door just as he heard the back door splinter inward. He ran. The streets of Baghdad at dusk are a maze of shadows and sudden turns, of courtyards that open onto other courtyards, of rooftops that connect like the steps of a staircase. Yusuf knew these streets the way a man knows the lines of his own palm. He ducked through an archway, vaulted a low wall, squeezed through a gap between 2 buildings that would have been too narrow for his pursuers. Behind him, he heard shouting. He ran until his lungs burned, until the voices faded, until the streets grew unfamiliar. He found himself in a quarter he did not recognize, where the buildings leaned close, and the air smelled of old smoke and standing water. He stopped in the shadow of a crumbling wall and bent over, gasping. When he straightened, he realized he was not alone. A figure stood at the far end of the alley. It was too dark to see clearly, but Yusuf had the impression of height, of stillness. The figure did not move. It simply watched. Yusuf backed away, his hand on the satchel. The figure did not follow. He turned and ran again. By the time he stopped, full night had fallen. He was somewhere in the old city, near the ruins of a bathhouse that had been abandoned years ago after a fire. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Yusuf slipped inside. The interior was dark and smelled of ash and damp stone. Moonlight filtered through a hole in the roof, illuminating the remains of the central pool. Yusuf sat on the edge of the pool and let the satchel slide from his shoulder. He was alone. He was ruined. He had nothing but a chisel, a saw, and a key that no one wanted. He took out the key and held it in the moonlight. It pulsed. Not a trick of the light this time. A real rhythmic pulse, warm against his palm like a living thing. The calligraphy along its shaft seemed to glow faintly, the letters shifting, rearranging, forming words he almost understood. And then the key spoke. Not aloud, not in words that traveled through air, but in a voice that seemed to bypass his ears entirely and whisper directly into the hollow space behind his thoughts. Finally, the voice said, "You have no idea how long I have been waiting." Chapter 2. The Djinn Woman in the Key. Yusuf dropped the key. It clattered onto the stone floor of the ruined bathhouse, and for a moment the only sound was his own ragged breathing and the distant call of the night vendors in the streets beyond. The key lay there in the thin moonlight, silent and still, just a carved piece of ivory. He stared at it. He stared at his own hand, as if it had betrayed him. I am losing my mind, he thought. Hunger, fear, they do strange things to a man's senses. But even as he thought it, he knew it was not true. The voice had been real, not imagined. Real in the way that cold water is real, or pain, or the smell of smoke. It had been a woman's voice, low, amused, and edged with something he could not name. Relief, perhaps, or hunger. He crouched slowly and picked up the key again. The moment his fingers touched it, the voice returned. "Careful," it said. "Drop me again, and I may take offense." Yusuf nearly obeyed the impulse to hurl it across the room, but his hand would not open. He stood there, frozen, the key warm and faintly pulsing in his grip, and forced himself to speak. "Who?" His voice cracked. He tried again. "Who are you?" There was a pause, as if the voice were considering how much to tell him. "I am Sahar," it said at last, "daughter of wind and sand, born in the years before your people built cities or named your god. I am Djinn, and I have been bound in this key for longer than your language has had words for time." Yusuf's mouth was dry. He looked around the bathhouse, half expecting to see her standing in the shadows, but there was nothing, only the dark, the moonlight, the ruins. "You're in the key," he whispered. "In, around, bound to, the distinction hardly matters. What matters is that you hold me, and that means, Woodcarver, we are going to help each other." "I don't," Yusuf shook his head. "I don't want help from a djinn." "No?" Sahar's voice curled with amusement. "Then why did you run? Why did you take me from that pathetic little shop of yours and carry me into the night? You want something. I can taste it on you. Desperation has a flavor, you know. Bitter, like burnt almonds." Yusuf looked down at the key. In the moonlight, the calligraphy along its surface seemed alive, the script moving in slow spirals. "I don't even know what you are," he said. "I just told you." "No, I mean—" He struggled to find the words. "Are you a demon? A spirit? A trick?" "I am Djinn," Sahar said, and there was a sharpness to her voice now, like a blade drawn across silk. "We are not demons, though your holy men would have you think so. We are older than your angels and more honest than your saints. We are made of smokeless fire, and we do not beg forgiveness for what we are." Yusuf swallowed. His heart was still hammering, but beneath the fear something else was stirring. Curiosity, perhaps, or the terrible clarity that comes when a man has lost everything and has nothing left to lose. "Why are you bound?" he asked. Another pause, longer this time. "Because I made a mistake," Sahar said quietly. "A long time ago, and the one who bound me was stronger than I was wise." Her voice shifted, became brisk again. "But that is an old story, and you have more immediate concerns. You are hunted, Woodcarver. Even now, the moneylender's men are searching for you. They will find you by dawn if you stay in this city." "I can't leave Baghdad," Yusuf said. "Everything I have is here. My tools, my home. Your tools are being loaded onto a cart as we speak. Your home is no longer yours. Accept it, or waste time mourning what is already gone." The words were brutal, but they were also true. Yusuf felt the last fragile hope inside him crack and fall away. He sat on the edge of the empty pool and put his head in his hands. "Then I have nothing," he said. "You have me," Sahar said, and before he could respond, the air in the bathhouse shifted. It was subtle at first, a stirring, like the breath before a storm. The dust on the floor began to move, swirling in slow spirals. The moonlight dimmed, and a shape began to form in the center of the room. Not solid, not quite, but there, a figure made of wind and shadow and faint, shimmering heat. tall, slender, draped in what might have been silk or might have been smoke. Her face was half visible, sharp and fierce and beautiful in the way that a drawn sword is beautiful. Her eyes were dark, but they caught the light like polished stone. She looked at him, and Yusuf could not look away. "This is all I can manage," Sahar said, and now her voice came from the figure as well as from the key. "The binding is still strong. I cannot leave the key, not fully. But I can show myself. I can speak, and I can do small things." She raised a hand, and the dust devils on the floor spun faster. One of them rose into the air, twisted itself into a knot, and dissolved. "Parlor tricks," she said with something like bitterness. "But they may be enough to keep you alive." Yusuf stared at her. His fear had not left him, but it had changed shape. It was no longer the blind panic of a man fleeing thugs in an alley. It was the cold, watchful fear of a man standing at the edge of something vast and incomprehensible. "Why do you want to help me?" he asked. "I don't," Sahar said bluntly. "I want to help myself, but our interests align. You need to survive. I need to be free. And the only way I can be free is if you carry me through the 7 gates. "The 7 gates?" Yusuf repeated. Sahar tilted her head, and the motion sent ripples through her half-formed shape. "You don't know," she said. "Of course you don't. No one has known for centuries." She stepped closer, and Yusuf felt the temperature drop. "The key you hold is not just a key, it is a map, a test, a passage. There are 7 gates hidden in the world, 7 thresholds that were made in the time before time, when the boundaries between your realm and ours were thin as spider silk. They are locked. They have always been locked. But the key can open them." "Why would I want to open them?" Yusuf asked. "Because each gate is also a door out," Sahar said, "a way through danger, a path that others cannot follow, and because—" She paused and her eyes gleamed. "Because each time a gate opens, the binding on me weakens. 7 gates, 7 cracks in my prison. Open them all, and I go free. And if I don't, then you die in this city," Sahar said simply. "Or you run, and you are caught, and you spend the rest of your life in a debtor's prison carving spoons for other men's tables. Your choice." Yusuf looked down at the key in his hand. The warmth of it had spread up his arm, into his chest. It did not feel like a curse, it felt like a lifeline. "What do I have to do?" he asked. Sahar smiled. It was not a comforting smile. "Find the gates," she said. "Walk through them. Survive what lies between, and do not," her voice sharpened, "do not assume that simply holding me will make you safe. The gates do not open for gold or strength or prayers. They open for one thing only." "What?" "The right choice," Sahar said. "Made at the right time. When you are tested, Woodcarver, you will know, and you will have to decide what kind of man you are." Yusuf wanted to ask more, but at that moment, a sound echoed through the ruined bathhouse. Footsteps, coming closer, and the low murmur of voices. Sahar's form flickered. "They have found us," she said. "Quickly. Where do I go?" "Out, away. Trust me, and I will guide you." Yusuf hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then he stuffed the key into his sash, grabbed his satchel, and ran for the back entrance of the bathhouse. The door was half collapsed, opening onto a narrow alley that stank of rot and old rain. He ducked through it just as he heard voices shouting behind him. "There! I saw movement!" Yusuf sprinted down the alley. It twisted sharply to the left, then to the right, and he had no idea where he was going, but Sahar's voice was there, steady and cold in his mind. "Left here, climb the wall, quickly, they are close." He obeyed without thinking. The wall was low, crumbling brick, and he hauled himself over it, and dropped into a courtyard filled with broken pottery. He kept running. Right. Through that archway. There is a market beyond. Lose yourself in the crowd. And there was a market. A late-night bazaar, torchlit and chaotic, where travelers and insomniacs bought grilled meat and spiced tea. Yusuf plunged into the throng of bodies, pushing past merchants and beggars, his breath ragged, his heart hammering. Behind him he heard the enforcers shouting. They were gaining. "Stop," Sahar said. "What?" "Stop running. Stand still. Trust me." Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving, but he stopped. He pressed himself against the side of a stall selling copper lamps and tried to steady his breathing. The enforcers burst into the market, scanning the crowd. One of them pointed in Yusuf's direction. They started toward him. And then, the nearest torch went out. Not a gust of wind, not a natural flicker. It simply died, as if something had reached out and snuffed it between invisible fingers. Then the next torch, then the next. A wave of darkness rolled through the market, and the crowd began to murmur in confusion. In the sudden shadows, Yusuf saw Sahar's shape coalesce beside him, faint, barely more than a shimmer of heat. "Run now," she whispered. "While they are blind." He ran. By the time the torches were relit, he was 3 streets away, gasping in the doorway of a shuttered shop. The enforcers were gone. The market was a distant glow behind him. Yusuf slid down the wall and sat on the ground, his legs shaking. "You saved me," he said. Sahar's voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. "I saved us," she corrected. "Do not confuse the two." "What was the cost?" Yusuf asked. He was not a fool. He had heard the stories. Djinn did not help without a price. Sahar's form solidified slightly, just enough that he could see the sharp line of her jaw, the cold glitter of her eyes. "The cost," she said, "is that you owe me. Not gold, not service, not your soul, I have no use for that, but a debt, small now, a favor to be named later." "What kind of favor?" "I will know it when I see it," Sahar said, "and when I ask you will not refuse. Do you agree?" Yusuf hesitated. Everything in him said this was a mistake, but the alternative was capture, ruin, the slow grinding death of a man without choices. "I agree," he said. Sahar smiled. "Good, then we are bound, Woodcarver, not by magic. I have little enough of that left, but by need, and by the road ahead." She gestured and her shape began to fade. "Now rest. Tomorrow we leave Baghdad. Where are we going?" "To the first gate," Sahar said. "The gate of smoke. It is not far, but the path there will not be easy." Her voice faded and the air grew still again. The key at Yusuf's waist was cool and silent, just a piece of carved ivory. Yusuf sat in the doorway until the night grew cold and the stars wheeled overhead. He thought of his father, who had taught him to read wood as if it were a language. He thought of his small shop, now lost. He thought of the road ahead and the strange creature bound in the key at his side. And he thought, "I am either a fool or a dead man, perhaps both." But he did not go back. When dawn broke pale and quiet over Baghdad, Yusuf rose and began to walk. He did not know where the first gate was, but Sahar would guide him. Of that at least he was certain. Behind him, the city woke. Ahead, the desert waited. Chapter 3. The Caravanserai Without Lanterns. Yusuf left Baghdad by the eastern gate, the one that opened onto the old caravan road leading toward the hills and the trade routes beyond. The gate was crowded at dawn with merchants and travelers, and he slipped into the flow of people without difficulty. No one paid attention to a lone man with a satchel and dusty clothes. He was one of 100. The key rested against his ribs, warm and silent. For the first hour he walked without thinking, driven only by the need to put distance between himself and Al-Khattab's men. The road unspooled before him, dusty and rutted, flanked by low scrub and the occasional fig tree. Other travelers moved in clusters, families with donkeys, merchants with laden camels, pilgrims walking barefoot toward Mecca. No one spoke to him. He did not speak to them. It was only when the walls of Baghdad had disappeared behind the haze of distance that he began to feel the full weight of what he had done. He had left everything: his home, his trade, the narrow streets he had known since childhood. And for what? A promise from a djinn, a key that might be cursed. 7 gates, he thought. What does that even mean? He had no map, no supplies, no destination except east, and that only because Sahar had murmured the word into his mind as he passed through the gate. The sun climbed higher. The air grew hot and still. By midday, Yusuf's throat was parched and his feet ached. He stopped at a well by the roadside and drank deeply, then refilled his water skin, a battered thing he had bought from a vendor just outside the city, along with a half-loaf of bread and 3 dried figs. He sat in the shade of the well and ate one of the figs slowly, savoring it. Quite the feast, Sahar's voice said dryly. Yusuf nearly choked. He looked around, but the road was empty. She had not materialized. "I thought you were asleep," he said quietly. "I do not sleep," she said. "I wait. There is a difference." "Can you always hear me?" "Only when you hold the key, or when you speak to me. I am not omniscient, Woodcarver. I am a prisoner with a very small window." Yusuf finished the fig and stood. "Where am I going?" "There is a caravanserai a half-day's walk from here," Sahar said. "It is called the Way House of the Thorn. You will stop there tonight." "And then?" "And then we will see if you survive it." Her voice faded before he could ask what she meant. The Way House of the Thorn sat at a crossroads, where the eastern road split, one branch leading toward the mountains, the other curving south toward the river towns. It was a squat, thick-walled structure built of mud brick and timber, with a courtyard large enough to hold 12 camels and a second story that housed small sleeping rooms. A few travelers were already there when Yusuf arrived at dusk. A pair of merchants arguing over the price of saffron, a family with 3 small children, an old man who sat alone by the courtyard fountain and muttered prayers under his breath. The keeper of the caravanserai was a woman named Bilqis, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, who took Yusuf's coin and assigned him a corner on the 2nd floor. "You'll share the room," she said. "It's a copper less than a private space, and you don't look like a man who has copper to waste." She was not wrong. Yusuf climbed the narrow stairs and found the room, a low-ceiling space with sleeping mats laid out in rows. 2 other men were already there, both asleep or pretending to be. He chose a mat near the window, set down his satchel, and lay back. The key pressed against his ribs. He took it out and held it up to the fading light. The calligraphy along its surface seemed darker now, the script almost black against the ivory. "What is this place?" he whispered. Sahar's presence unfurled like a slow breath. "A test," she said. "Or a trap. Sometimes they are the same. You're not making sense." "The Way House of the Thorn has a rule," Sahar said. "No fire after sundown, no lanterns, no candles, nothing that burns." Yusuf frowned. "Why?" "Because something comes when there is light. Something old. Something that should have been forgotten, but was not. The travelers who stop here know the rule, and they obey it. But there are always those who do not know, or those who think themselves exceptions. And if someone lights a fire, then the thing comes, and it feeds. A chill ran down Yusuf's spine despite the warmth of the evening. "Why didn't you warn me before I came here?" "Because you need to pass through this place to reach the first gate," Sahar said, "and because I wanted to see if you would run." "I should, but you won't." She was right. He hated that she was right. Yusuf lay back on the mat and closed his eyes. He could hear the sounds of the Caravanserai settling into evening. Low voices, the clatter of dishes, the soft shuffle of camels in the courtyard. Somewhere below, a child laughed. It was an ordinary sound, and it made the danger feel unreal. He slept fitfully. He woke to darkness and the sound of whispering. The room was black, utterly black, without even starlight from the window. The whispering came from the other side of the room, low and urgent. Yusuf sat up slowly, his heart pounding, and strained to hear. "Told you no fire. It's just a candle, woman. I can't see my own hand. The rule exists for a reason. Superstition." The voices belonged to two of his roommates. Yusuf's eyes adjusted enough to make out shapes. One man sitting up, the other crouched near the door with something in his hand. A flint and steel, the smell of wax. "Don't," Yusuf said, his voice sharp. The man with the flint turned. "Mind your own business, friend." "You'll kill us," Yusuf said. He did not know why he said it, only that Sahar's words were echoing in his mind like a warning bell. "It's a candle," the man said, "not a bonfire." He struck the flint. The spark caught. The wick flared. And for one brief, lovely moment, warm light filled the room. Then the light went out. Not because the candle had been blown out, not because the wick had failed. It went out because something drank it. The darkness surged inward, thicker than before, and the temperature in the room dropped so sharply that Yusuf's breath misted in front of his face. The man who had lit the candle made a small, choked sound. "What?" he began, and then the thing came. Yusuf did not see it, not clearly. It was too dark, and the shape of it was wrong. Too tall, too thin, folded in on itself like a shadow with joints. But he felt it, cold and vast and hungry, moving through the room with a sound like wind through a cracked door. The man who had lit the candle screamed. The sound cut off abruptly. There was a wet, tearing noise. A thud. Yusuf pressed himself against the wall, his hand on the key. His pulse hammered in his ears. Across the room, the other man was praying in a frantic whisper. The thing moved again. Yusuf heard it step closer, heard the faint scrape of something against the floor. And then Sahar's voice, sharp and commanding in his mind. "The window! Now!" Yusuf did not think. He grabbed his satchel and lunged for the window. It was small and narrow, but he forced himself through it, scraping his shoulders against the frame, and dropped into the courtyard below. He landed hard, the impact jarring his bones, and rolled to his feet. Above him, the window was a black rectangle. No sound came from it. The courtyard was in chaos. Other travelers were stumbling out of their rooms, shouting, demanding to know what was happening. Bilkis stood in the center of the courtyard with a heavy staff in her hands, her face pale. "Who lit a fire?" she shouted. "Who broke the rule?" No one answered, no one who could. Yusuf slipped toward the gate, his hands shaking, but before he could reach it, a hand grabbed his arm. He spun, ready to fight. It was a boy, perhaps 8 years old, thin and wide-eyed. He was clutching a bundle of cloth to his chest and breathing in shallow gasps. "Please," the boy whispered, "don't leave me." Yusuf looked down at him. He thought of the man in the room above, the way his scream had been cut short. He thought of Sahar's voice, cold and pragmatic. Survive. He could leave the boy. It would be easier, but he did not. "Stay close," Yusuf said. He pulled the boy toward the gate, and together they slipped out into the night. Behind them, the Wayhouse of the Thorn was silent. They ran until the Caravanserai was lost in the darkness behind them, until the only sounds were their own ragged breathing and the whisper of wind across the empty land. Yusuf's legs burned and his lungs felt scraped raw, but he did not stop until the boy stumbled and fell to his knees. Yusuf stopped and turned back. The boy was gasping, his small chest heaving. In the starlight, Yusuf could see tear tracks on his dusty cheeks. "I can't," the boy whispered. "I can't run anymore." Yusuf crouched beside him. "What's your name?" "Tariq." "Where is your family, Tariq?" The boy's face crumpled. "My father, he was in the room. He's the one who—" His voice broke. Yusuf closed his eyes. The man with the candle, the scream. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Tariq wiped his face with the back of his hand. "What was that thing?" "I don't know," Yusuf lied. He did not want to frighten the boy further. "A night drinker," Sahar's voice said in his mind, so quiet that only he could hear. "A creature of the old darkness. They were more common once, before your people learned to fear the night. Now only a few remain in places like this, places where the boundaries are thin. How do we stop it?" Yusuf thought, careful not to speak aloud. "We don't," Sahar said. "It will feed and then sleep. By dawn, it will be gone." "And the people still in the Caravanserai? Those who did not break the rule will survive. Those who did—" She paused. "You cannot save everyone, Woodcarver. You can barely save yourself." Yusuf looked down at Tariq. The boy was staring at him, waiting. "We'll rest here," Yusuf said. "Just for a little while. Then we keep moving." "Where are we going?" Yusuf did not have an answer. He looked out at the dark road stretching east, toward the hills and the unknown. Somewhere out there was the first gate. Somewhere out there was a door he did not understand and a test he had not chosen. But he had the key, and he had made a choice in that dark room, not to leave the boy behind. Perhaps that was enough. "Somewhere safer," Yusuf said. It was not much of an answer, but it seemed to comfort Tariq. The boy nodded and wrapped his bundle of cloth more tightly around himself. They sat in silence for a time, and gradually the sky began to lighten in the east. The darkness thinned, the stars faded. By the time the sun rose, the Wayhouse of the Thorn was a smudge on the horizon behind them. Yusuf stood and offered his hand to Tariq. "Come on," he said. "We should keep moving." Tariq took his hand, and together they began to walk. The road east was rougher than the highway from Baghdad. It narrowed and twisted, climbing gradually into the foothills. The landscape changed from flat scrubland to rocky slopes dotted with thorn bushes and stunted trees. The air grew cooler. By midday, they passed through a village so small it had no name, just a handful of mud brick houses and a well. Yusuf bought bread and goat cheese from an old woman who eyed them suspiciously but took his coins. "Where are you headed?" she asked. "East," Yusuf said. "Nothing east but the old caravans in trouble," the woman said. "Turn back if you're wise." Yusuf thanked her and did not turn back. That night they camped in a hollow beside the road. There was no shelter, only the open sky and the cold wind that came down from the hills. Yusuf built a small fire, just enough to warm their hands and heat the bread. Tariq sat close to the flames, his face solemn. "Why did you help me?" the boy asked suddenly. Yusuf looked at him. "What do you mean? You could have left me. It would have been easier." Yusuf did not answer immediately. He thought of Sahar's words. "You owe me." He thought of the choice he had made in the dark room, the instinct that had made him reach for the boy's hand instead of running alone. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe I'm a fool." Tariq shook his head. My father used to say that only a fool helps a stranger, but he also said that a man who helps no one is already dead. Your father was a wise man, Yusuf said. He was, Tariq said quietly, until he wasn't. They sat in silence after that, watching the fire burn low. When Tariq finally fell asleep, curled in his thin cloak, Yusuf took out the key and held it to the firelight. You were testing me, he said softly. In that Caravanserai, you wanted to see if I would save the boy. I wanted to see what kind of man you are. Sahar said. Her voice was thoughtful, less sharp than usual. The gates will not open for cowards or saints. They open for those who make choices. Real choices. The kind that cost something. What did it cost me? Time, safety. The boy is a burden now. You could move faster without him. You could hide more easily. I'm not leaving him. I know, Sahar said, and there was something in her voice that might have been approval or curiosity. It was hard to tell. Yusuf lay back and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the hills, was the first gate, the gate of smoke. He did not know what it would look like, or what it would demand of him. He only knew that he was walking toward it, and that he was not walking alone. The next day brought them to the edge of a town called Kayat, a dusty market town that straddled the caravan route. It was larger than the nameless village, but still small by the standards of Baghdad. Perhaps 200 souls, a market square, a mosque with a cracked minaret, and a caravanserai that looked newer and cleaner than the Wayhouse of the Thorn. Yusuf and Tariq arrived in the late afternoon, when the market was busy with travelers restocking supplies before heading into the hills. The smell of grilled lamb and fresh bread filled the air, mingling with dust and animal dung. Tariq's eyes went wide at the sight of the food stalls. Can we? He began. Yes, Yusuf said before the boy could finish. He bought skewers of lamb and flatbread still warm from the oven, and they sat in the shade of a date palm to eat. It was the first real meal either of them had eaten in days, and for a few minutes the danger and the darkness seemed far away. But Sahar's voice was there, a cold thread beneath the warmth of the sun. They are here, she said. Yusuf's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Who? The hunters, Al-Khattab's men. They have followed you. Yusuf looked around the market square, his heart beginning to pound. At first he saw nothing unusual, just merchants and travelers, the usual press of bodies. But then he spotted them, 3 men standing near the entrance to the caravanserai, watching the crowd. One of them he recognized, the thick-shouldered enforcer from Baghdad. How did they find me? Yusuf whispered. You are not as invisible as you think, Sahar said. And they are persistent. Al-Khattab wants the key. He does not know what it is, but he knows it is valuable. He can taste that much. What do I do? You have 2 choices. Run now, and they will follow. Or wait until dark, and I will help you disappear. Yusuf glanced at Tariq, who was chewing his bread, oblivious. The boy had been through enough. He did not deserve to be dragged into a chase through unfamiliar streets, but there was no time to find a safe place for him. The enforcers were moving now, pushing through the crowd, their eyes scanning faces. We have to go, Yusuf said. He grabbed Tariq's arm and pulled him to his feet. What? Now? They ducked into the flow of the market, weaving between stalls. Yusuf kept his head down, his hand on the key. Behind them, he heard a shout. There! The Woodcarver! They ran. The market spilled out into a maze of narrow streets and alleys, and Yusuf plunged into it without thinking. Tariq ran beside him, his small legs pumping. The shouts of the enforcers grew louder, closer. Left, Sahar said. Then right. There is a gate at the end. Go through it. Yusuf obeyed. They burst through a wooden gate into a courtyard filled with chickens and laundry lines. An old woman shrieked at them, but they were already gone, vaulting a low wall and dropping into another alley. The enforcers were still behind them. Yusuf could hear their boots on the stone. "You cannot outrun them," Sahar said. "Not with the boy. You must make a choice." "What choice?" "Hide him. Leave him somewhere safe, then lead the hunters away." "No. Then you will both be caught." Yusuf's chest burned. His mind raced. There had to be another way. And then he saw it. A caravanserai at the end of the alley, its gate open, travelers streaming in and out. And beside the gate, half hidden in shadow, was an old man sitting on a low stool. He had the look of a beggar, but his eyes were sharp. Yusuf made a decision. He ran to the old man and pressed a coin into his hand. His last coin. "Please," he gasped, "hide the boy, just for an hour. I'll come back for him." The old man looked at the coin, then at Tariq, then at Yusuf. He did not ask questions. He simply nodded. "Go," he said, and pulled Tariq into the shadows beside him. Yusuf did not wait. He ran back into the alley, making as much noise as he could, drawing the enforcers away from the gate. He heard them shout, heard them turn to follow him. Good. He ran until his lungs screamed, until his vision blurred. He ran until he could not hear the enforcers anymore, until the streets grew unfamiliar and the sun began to set. And then, in the growing dusk, he stopped. He was alone. "Well done," Sahar said quietly. "You chose to protect the boy instead of yourself. That is twice now." "I'm not a saint," Yusuf said, gasping. "No," Sahar agreed. "But you are not a coward either. That is something." Yusuf slumped against a wall, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had bought time, but he had also made himself a target, and somewhere behind him, Tariq was waiting, trusting that Yusuf would return. He would, he had to, but first, he needed to survive the night. When full darkness fell, Yusuf moved through the town like a ghost. Sahar guided him, her voice a thread in the dark, leading him down forgotten alleys and across rooftops. Twice they passed within a few feet of the enforcers, and twice, Sahar whispered, "Be still," and the shadows seemed to thicken around him, hiding him from view. By the time he returned to the Caravanserai gate, the market was empty and the streets were quiet. The old man was still there, sitting on his stool. Tariq was beside him, asleep with his head on the old man's knee. The old man looked up at Yusuf and nodded. "You came back," he said. "It was not a question. I said I would." Many men say things. The old man stood carefully, easing Tariq's head onto the ground without waking him. Few keep their word. Yusuf knelt and lifted Tariq gently. The boy stirred, but did not wake. "Thank you," Yusuf said. The old man waved a hand. "Go. They are still looking for you, and the road east is not safe after dark." Yusuf nodded and turned to go. But before he left, the old man spoke again. "The key you carry," he said quietly. "It hums. I can hear it. Be careful, Woodcarver. The doors it opens are not always doors you want to walk through." Yusuf stopped. He looked back at the old man, but the shadows were too deep to see his face clearly. "How did you—" "Go," the old man said, "before they find you again." Yusuf went. They camped that night in the hills beyond Kayat, in a cave barely large enough for the two of them. Yusuf built no fire. He sat with his back against the stone wall and watched the stars appear one by one in the mouth of the cave. Tariq woke sometime in the night, confused and frightened. "Where are we?" he whispered. "Safe," Yusuf said, "for now." Tariq was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You came back for me. I said I would." My father used to say that too. The boy's voice was small, but he didn't, not always. Yusuf did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He simply sat with the boy until Tariq's breathing evened out and he fell asleep again. When Sahar spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. "You are gathering debts, Woodcarver," she said. "The boy trusts you now. That is a kind of burden." "I know." "Good, because the first gate is close. Tomorrow you will see it, and when you do, you will have to choose again. Not for me, not for the boy, for yourself." "What kind of choice?" "The kind that shows what you're made of," Sahar said. "The gate of smoke does not open for the clever or the strong. It opens for those who are willing to burn." Yusuf looked down at the key in his hand. It was warm, pulsing faintly, like a second heartbeat. "I don't understand," he said. "You will," Sahar said. "When the time comes, you will." Her voice faded, and Yusuf was left alone with the silence and the stars. He did not sleep. He sat and watched the darkness and tried not to think about what the morning would bring. But dawn came anyway, as it always does, and with it, smoke. Chapter 4. First Gate of Smoke, the Night of Burning Shops. Yusuf woke to the smell. It was faint at first, distant, just a thread of something acrid on the wind. He opened his eyes and saw pale light filtering into the cave, the sky outside the color of old copper. Tariq was still asleep, curled against the far wall. The air was cold, but the smell was warm. Wrong. Smoke. Yusuf crawled to the mouth of the cave and looked out. Below, in the valley where the road wound between the hills, a smudge of darkness rose into the sky. It was too thick to be morning mist, too dark to be anything but fire. "The town," Sahar's voice said, and there was an edge to it that Yusuf had not heard before. Not fear. Djinn did not fear fire, but something close to anticipation. "Kayat is burning." Yusuf's stomach tightened. "How?" "Does it matter?" Sahar said. "The gate of smoke is there, in the fire. If you want to pass through it, you must go now, before it is too late." "People are dying." "People are always dying," Sahar said, and her voice was cold again. "That is not your concern. Your concern is the gate." Yusuf looked back at Tariq, still sleeping. Then he looked at the smoke rising from the valley. He thought of the choice Sahar had spoken of, the kind that shows what you're made of. He stood and woke the boy gently. "Tariq, we have to go." The boy blinked, groggy. "Where?" "Back to the town." Tariq's eyes widened. "Why? You said it wasn't safe." "It's not," Yusuf said, "but people need help and He hesitated. "I need to do something." Tariq looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded and gathered his bundle. They descended from the hills quickly, half running, half sliding down the rocky path. The smell of smoke grew stronger with every step. By the time they reached the outskirts of Kayat, the air was hazy and the sound of shouting echoed through the streets. The fire had started in the market quarter, in the district where the woodworkers and cloth merchants kept their shops. It had spread quickly, too quickly, as if someone had wanted it to spread. Buildings that should have been stone were burning like kindling. People ran through the streets carrying bundles, dragging children, their faces streaked with soot and terror. Yusuf pushed through the chaos, Tariq close behind him. The heat was immense, a wall of shimmering air that made his eyes water. He could see the heart of the fire now, a cluster of workshops collapsing inward, their roofs caving in, sending sparks spiraling into the sky. "There," Sahar said. "Do you see it?" Yusuf looked where she indicated, and his breath caught. In the center of the burning quarter, half hidden by smoke, was a doorway that should not have been there. It was tall and narrow, carved into the air itself, its edges limned with faint silver light. The fire seemed to bend around it, as if even flame recognized that it was something other. The Gate of Smoke. "Go," Sahar urged. "Walk through it, and you will be safe. The fire cannot follow you beyond the threshold." Yusuf stared at the gate. It was so close, 100 paces, maybe less. He could reach it, he could save himself, but between him and the gate were the burning shops. And in those shops, he could hear voices, screaming. Someone was trapped. "Do not be a fool," Sahar said sharply. "You cannot save everyone. Go through the gate, now." Yusuf looked at Tariq. The boy's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. But he was not running. He was waiting to see what Yusuf would do. Yusuf made his choice. "Stay here," he said to Tariq. "Stay in the street. If I don't come back—" "You'll come back," Tariq said. His voice was small but steady. Yusuf turned and ran toward the burning shops. The heat hit him like a fist. He pulled his headcloth over his mouth and nose, but it did little to keep out the smoke. His eyes streamed. His lungs burned. The roar of the fire was deafening, a living thing that devoured sound and air and hope. He could hear the voice more clearly now, a man's voice, hoarse with smoke, calling for help. It came from a workshop on the corner, its door blocked by a fallen beam. Yusuf grabbed the beam and pulled. It was heavy, hot enough to blister his palms, but he hauled it aside. The door swung open and a man stumbled out, coughing, his clothes singed. He was young, perhaps Yusuf's age, with a soot-streaked face and wild eyes. "Thank you," the man gasped. "Thank you." "Is anyone else inside?" Yusuf demanded. The man shook his head. "I don't know. I think there might be." Yusuf did not wait. He ducked into the shop. The interior was an inferno. The walls were lined with shelves of wood and cloth, all of it burning. The smoke was so thick he could barely see. He called out, his voice cracking, "Is anyone here?" A faint sound, a whimper. He followed it to the back of the shop where a small figure was huddled beneath a table. A girl, no more than 6 years old, her eyes squeezed shut, her hands over her ears. Yusuf grabbed her and lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light, and she did not struggle. He turned and ran for the door. The ceiling groaned. He threw himself forward as the roof collapsed behind him, a cascade of burning timber and sparks. He hit the ground hard, shielding the girl with his body, and felt the heat scorch his back. Then hands were pulling him up, Tariq and the young man, dragging him into the street. Yusuf set the girl down, and she immediately began to cry, reaching for the young man. "Papa," she sobbed. The man gathered her into his arms, his face crumpling. I thought I'd lost you." Yusuf bent over, coughing violently. His hands were blistered, his back throbbed, but he was alive. "You are an idiot," Sahar said, but her voice was not angry. It was something else, something Yusuf could not name. "The gate," he rasped. "Is it still there?" "Yes, but not for long. The fire is dying. When it dies, the gate will close." Yusuf looked at the burning quarter. The flames were already lower, the worst of the blaze spent. Townspeople were forming bucket lines, dousing the edges of the fire with water from the wells. It would be out soon, and the gate, he could see it, shimmering in the smoke. It was fading, its edges growing dim. "Go," Sahar said. "Now." Yusuf turned to Tariq. "Come on." They ran. The gate was perhaps 50 paces away, but it felt like miles. Yusuf's legs were shaking, his vision swimming. The smoke swirled around them, thick and choking. He could hear Sahar's voice, a constant thread guiding him. "Faster! It's closing. Faster. They were 10 paces away when Yusuf heard the shout behind him. Stop! Thief! He glanced back. One of Al-Khattab's enforcers had spotted him, had followed him even here, into the chaos. The man was running toward them, his face twisted with rage. Ignore him, Sahar said. The gate. Yusuf reached the threshold and stopped. The gate was tall and narrow, carved from smoke and light. Through it he could see nothing, just darkness, cool and still. A passage out, a way to escape. Tariq was beside him, breathing hard. The enforcer was closing fast. Yusuf looked at the gate, then he looked at Tariq. Go, he said. What? Through the gate. Go, I'll follow. But, now, Tariq. The boy hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then he stepped through the gate and vanished. The enforcer was almost upon him. Yusuf could see the man's hand reaching for him, could hear his ragged breathing. Yusuf stepped through the gate. The world shifted. For a moment there was nothing, no sound, no light, no sense of up or down, just a vast, cool emptiness that pressed against him from all sides. Then his feet hit solid ground, and he stumbled forward into darkness. He was in a narrow passage, smooth-walled and silent. Behind him, the gate was a faint rectangle of fading light. As he watched, it shrank and winked out, leaving only stone. Tariq was a few paces ahead, wide-eyed and trembling. What was that? The boy whispered. The first gate, Yusuf said. His voice echoed strangely in the confined space. You passed, Sahar said. And now her voice was not cold. It was warm, approving. You could have walked through immediately. You could have saved yourself and left the others to burn. But you didn't. You chose to help, even when it cost you time, even when it put you in danger. I couldn't just leave them, Yusuf said. I know, Sahar said. That is why the gate opened. Yusuf looked down at the key in his hand. The ivory was warmer now, and the calligraphy along its surface seemed brighter, as if something inside it had awakened. Where are we? He asked. Between, Sahar said. Between the world of fire and the world of stone. This passage will take you out of the town, beyond the reach of your hunters. But it will not last long. Walk quickly. Yusuf took Tariq's hand, and together they began to walk. The passage was narrow and winding, lit by a faint phosphorescence that came from the walls themselves. It sloped downward at first, then leveled out, then climbed. There were no branches, no side doors, just the single path leading forward. After what felt like an hour, though Yusuf had no way to measure time in that place, the passage began to brighten. Ahead, he could see daylight. They emerged into a canyon, narrow and steep-sided, with a thin stream running along its floor. The air was cool and clean, untainted by smoke. The sky above was pale blue, empty. Yusuf turned back to look at the passage they had come through. There was nothing, just the canyon wall, solid and unbroken. The gate was gone. 1 down, Sahar said. 6 to go. Yusuf let out a long, shaky breath. His hands were still blistered, his back still throbbed. But he was alive, and he had saved 3 people, the young man, his daughter, and himself. 4, he thought, looking at Tariq. I saved 4. Come on, he said to the boy. We should keep moving. Tariq nodded. He looked older somehow, or perhaps just more tired. They followed the stream out of the canyon, into the hills beyond. The smoke of Kayat was far behind them now, a memory and a scar. But ahead, somewhere ahead, was the second gate, and Yusuf had no idea what it would ask of him. Chapter 5. The Salt Mirror Plain and the Riders Behind. For 2 days, Yusuf and Tariq walked east through the hills. The land grew drier with each mile, the green scrub giving way to thorn and stone. The stream they had followed from the canyon dwindled to a trickle, then disappeared entirely into the cracked earth. By the afternoon of the second day, they had reached the edge of a vast, flat expanse that stretched to the horizon like a white sea. The salt plain. Yusuf had heard of such places, deserts of salt left behind when ancient seas had dried, places where men could walk for days without seeing green or water. He had never thought to cross one. "Is that snow?" Tariq asked, squinting at the white expanse. "No," Yusuf said. "Salt, the earth's bones, some call it." The boy's face fell. "Can we cross it?" Yusuf looked at the plain. The heat rising from it made the air shimmer, and the white surface was broken in places by dark cracks, like wounds in flesh. It looked impassable, but Sahar's voice was there, quiet and certain. "You must," she said. "The second gate lies on the far side. 3 days' walk if you are careful, 5 if you are slow, but you cannot stay here." "Why not?" "Because they are still following you." Yusuf turned sharply. Behind them, the hills rose in dusty folds, empty and silent. He saw nothing. "I don't see anyone," he said quietly. "You will," Sahar said. "Al-Khattab's men are persistent, and they have hired a tracker, a good one. He picked up your trail at the canyon's edge 2 days ago. He is half a day behind you now. By tomorrow, he will be closer." Yusuf felt the familiar cold weight settle in his chest. He had thought the gate had bought them safety. He had been wrong. "Then we crossed the plain," he said. They set out at dusk, when the worst heat had passed. The surface of the salt plain was hard and uneven, ridged and broken, and it crunched beneath their feet like fresh snow. The sound echoed strangely in the flat emptiness. There were no landmarks, no features, just the white expanse stretching in all directions, and the sky overhead turning from copper to indigo. Yusuf had filled their water skins at the last spring they had passed, but he knew it would not be enough. 3 days across the salt plain meant rationing carefully. He gave Tariq a single swallow and took one himself, then stoppered the skin. "Are we really being followed?" Tariq asked as they walked. "Yes." "By who?" "Men who want something I have." Tariq glanced at Yusuf's satchel. "The key?" Yusuf was surprised. "You know about the key?" "I saw it," Tariq said, "when you were sleeping in the cave. It glowed." Yusuf did not know what to say to that. The boy was sharper than he looked. "Yes," he said finally, "they want the key." "Why?" "Because it opens doors." "What kind of doors?" Yusuf looked out at the endless white plain. "The kind that change things." Tariq fell silent after that, and they walked without speaking as the stars came out one by one. The salt plain at night was both beautiful and terrible. The white surface reflected the starlight, turning the world into a bowl of cold luminescence. It felt like walking across the surface of the moon. By midnight, Yusuf called a halt. They had no shelter, so they simply sat on the salt and leaned against each other for warmth. Tariq fell asleep quickly, exhausted. Yusuf sat and watched the horizon, the key warm against his ribs. "You should sleep," Sahar said. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I keep thinking about the fire," Yusuf said. "About the people who didn't make it out." "You saved 3 lives," Sahar said. "That is more than most men do in a lifetime." "It doesn't feel like enough." "It never does," Sahar said quietly. "But you cannot carry the weight of every death, Woodcarver. You will break." Yusuf closed his eyes. He thought of the young man and his daughter, of the workshop collapsing, of the heat and the smoke. He thought of the choice he had made, to run into the fire instead of through the gate. "Why did the gate open for me?" he asked. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a woodcarver who ran out of money." "The gates do not open for heroes," Sahar said. They open for those who make the hard choice when it matters. You could have walked away. You didn't. That is enough. And the next gate? Yusuf asked. What will it ask of me? I do not know, Sahar said. Each gate is different. Each test is different. But I can tell you this. The second gate is the gate of water, and it will not open unless you give something freely, not out of obligation, not out of fear, but because you choose to. Yusuf did not understand, but he was too tired to ask more. He leaned his head back against the salt and let his eyes close. He did not dream. The next morning brought trouble. They woke to the sound of hooves. Yusuf sat up sharply, his heart pounding. The salt plain was still empty, but the sound was unmistakable. Horses, moving fast. He scrambled to his feet and looked back the way they had come. There, on the horizon, a line of riders, 5 of them, maybe 6, still distant but closing. Run, Yusuf said, pulling Tariq to his feet. Where? Anywhere. Just run. They ran. But running on the salt plain was agony. The surface was broken and uneven, and every step threatened to twist an ankle or send them sprawling. Yusuf's lungs burned. His legs felt like lead. Tariq stumbled and fell twice, and each time Yusuf had to haul him up and push him forward. The riders were gaining. You cannot outrun horses, Sahar said. You need to think. I'm trying. Try harder. Look at the ground. Do you see the cracks? Yusuf looked. The salt plain was broken in places by long fissures, dark lines where the salt had split, revealing the earth beneath. Some of them were shallow, others were deeper, like narrow canyons. There, Sahar said. The wide crack ahead, to your left. Get into it. Hide. Yusuf veered left, dragging Tariq with him. The crack was perhaps 3 feet wide and twice as deep, running in a jagged line across the plain. He dropped into it and pulled Tariq down beside him. The walls of the fissure were rough salt, glittering and sharp. He pressed himself against the wall and held his breath. The sound of hooves grew louder, then stopped. Yusuf risked a glance over the edge of the fissure. The riders had halted perhaps 100 paces away. They were scanning the plain, their horses stamping and blowing. One of them, a lean man with a hawk's face, dismounted and knelt, examining the ground. The tracker. He will find your footprints, Sahar said. He is good, but I can buy you time. How? Watch. The air above the salt plain began to shimmer, not with heat, with something else, a faint distortion, like ripples on water, and then the wind rose. It was not a natural wind. It came from nowhere, sudden and violent, sweeping across the plain in a howling gust. It lifted salt and dust into the air, turning the world white. The riders shouted and turned their horses, shielding their faces. The tracker's footprints and Yusuf's were erased in seconds. Run now, Sahar said, while they are blind. Yusuf climbed out of the fissure and ran. Tariq was beside him, his face pale but determined. The wind howled around them, stinging and cold, but it was cover. The riders were lost in the white storm, unable to see more than a few feet ahead. Yusuf ran until his legs gave out, until he fell to his knees on the salt and could not rise. Tariq collapsed beside him, gasping. The wind died as suddenly as it had come. Yusuf looked back. The riders were distant now, confused, arguing among themselves. One was pointing in the wrong direction. They had lost the trail. That will not hold them for long, Sahar said. But it is enough. You have time. Yusuf turned to the key pressed against his ribs. What did that cost? He asked quietly. Sahar was silent for a moment. Then, a favor, same as before. When the time comes, I will ask and you will not refuse. How many favors do I owe you now? 2, Sahar said. and you will owe more before this is done. Do not worry, Woodcarver. I do not ask for blood or souls, only choices." Yusuf did not find that comforting, but he was alive, and the riders were far behind. That was enough. "Come on," he said to Tariq. "We keep moving." They walked through the afternoon and into the evening until the sun sank low and turned the salt plain red as blood. Ahead, Yusuf could see the far edge of the plain, a line of low hills dark against the horizon, and there, just visible in the fading light, was a smudge of green. An oasis. Chapter 6. Second Gate of Water. The Stolen Well. They reached the oasis at dusk. It was small, just a cluster of date palms surrounding a stone well, with a few scattered tents and a makeshift corral for camels. Perhaps a dozen people lived there, travelers and traders who had made the oasis a permanent stop on the caravan route. Yusuf and Tariq stumbled into the camp like men rising from the sea. Their lips were cracked, their skin burned, their water skins empty. A woman saw them and called out, and within moments they were surrounded by hands offering water, bread, a place to sit. Yusuf drank gratefully, the water cool and sweet. Tariq drank until he choked, and someone laughed and patted his back. "Where did you come from?" the woman asked. She was middle-aged, her face weathered by sun and wind. "The salt plain?" Yusuf nodded. "On foot?" She looked incredulous. "Alone?" "Yes." "You are either very brave or very foolish," she said, but her tone was kind. "Rest. Eat. You look like you need it." They were given flatbread and dates and a corner near the fire to sleep. Yusuf ate slowly, savoring every bite. It was the first real meal he'd had in days, and it tasted like life itself. But as he ate, he became aware of a tension in the camp. The other travelers spoke in low voices, their faces grim. A man and a woman were arguing near the well, their voices sharp. Yusuf leaned toward the kind woman. "What's wrong?" She sighed. "The well. There are men who control it now. They came 3 days ago. Bandits, really, though they call themselves protectors. They charge for water, a silver coin per skin, and if you don't pay—" She trailed off. "What happens? They take your animals, your goods, whatever you have. And if you have nothing, they send you back into the desert." Yusuf felt a slow anger building in his chest. "Why doesn't anyone stop them?" "Stop them how?" the woman said bitterly. "They are armed. We are not. And the nearest town is 5 days' walk. By the time help arrived, we would all be dead of thirst." Yusuf looked at the well. It was surrounded by 4 men, all of them armed with cudgels and knives. They lounged in the shade of the palms, drinking and laughing, while the travelers watched with hollow eyes. "The second gate," Sahar's voice said quietly. "It is here, at the well." Yusuf glanced down at the key. "Where?" "You will see it when the time comes, but the gate will not open unless you restore the water to those who need it. The gate of water opens only for those who give freely." "I don't have a silver coin," Yusuf said under his breath. "Then you will have to find another way." That night Yusuf lay awake and thought. He had no money, no weapons, no leverage, but he had his hands, and he had his mind. He rose quietly and walked to the well. The bandits were asleep, sprawled near the fire. One of them was snoring. Yusuf approached the well and examined it carefully in the moonlight. It was old, built of stone and mortar, with a wooden winch to draw up the water. But the winch was broken, one of the supports had cracked, and the rope was frayed. That was why the bandits had been able to take control. They had fixed the winch, and now they demanded payment for every bucket drawn. Yusuf smiled grimly. He knew how to fix a winch. He returned to his pack and took out his tools, the small chisel, the saw, the leather cords he had salvaged from his uncle's trunk. Then he went back to the well and began to work. It took him most of the night. He cut a new support from a fallen palm branch, carved it to fit, and lashed it in place with the leather cords. He replaced the frayed rope with a length of cord from one of the tents. Borrowed, not stolen, he told himself. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the winch was whole again, and it no longer needed the bandits' repair. Yusuf tested it carefully. The rope moved smoothly, the bucket descended and rose without catching. The well was free. He turned to go, and found one of the bandits standing behind him. The man was broad-shouldered and ugly with a scar across his nose. He looked at the repaired winch, then at Yusuf. "What do you think you're doing?" he growled. "Fixing what you broke," Yusuf said. The bandit's face darkened. "That well is ours. You had no right." "The well belongs to no one," Yusuf said. "Water is a gift. You've been stealing it." The bandit reached for his cudgel. "I'll break your—" A voice cut through the dawn. "No, you won't." The kind woman stood at the edge of the camp, and behind her were the other travelers. Not all of them, but enough. They held whatever they could find: sticks, stones, a rusted sword. They were not fighters, but they were tired of being afraid. The bandit looked at them, then at Yusuf. His hand hovered over his cudgel. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Maybe," the woman said, "but we're making it together." The bandit spat on the ground. Then he turned and walked to the fire, kicking his companions awake. They argued in low voices, casting dark looks at Yusuf and the travelers. But they did not attack. There were too many now. Too many who were willing to fight. By mid-morning, the bandits had packed their things and left. The travelers cheered. The kind woman embraced Yusuf, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Yusuf looked at the well. The bucket hung free, the water within cool and clear. He had given nothing but his time and his skill, but it had been enough. And then he saw it. At the base of the well, half hidden by the stones, was a door. Not a physical door. A threshold, shimmering and faint, made of water and light. The gate of water. "There," Sahar said. "Do you see it?" "Yes." "Then go. The gate will not remain open for long." Yusuf turned to Tariq. The boy was watching him, his eyes bright. "We're leaving, aren't we?" Tariq said. "Yes." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safer," Yusuf said. "I hope." He took Tariq's hand, and together they walked to the well. The travelers watched them, confused, as Yusuf knelt and reached toward the shimmering threshold. The moment his hand touched it, the world dissolved. They emerged in a canyon filled with the sound of rushing water. A river ran through its center, clear and cold, and the walls were lined with green moss and flowering vines. The air was cool and smelled of rain. Tariq gasped. "Where are we?" "Between," Yusuf said. He looked back, but the oasis was gone. There was only the river and the canyon and the sky above. "You passed the second gate," Sahar said. Her voice was warm, almost proud. "You gave freely, without thought of reward. That is what the gate required." Yusuf looked down at the key. The calligraphy along its surface was brighter now, and he thought he could see shapes within it, glyphs and symbols that shifted like water. "5 more gates," he said. "Yes," Sahar said, "and each will be harder than the last." Yusuf helped Tariq to his feet, and together they began to follow the river. Somewhere ahead, the 3rd gate was waiting, and behind them, far across the salt plain, the hunters were gathering again. Chapter 7. The Rope City Over the Canyon. The river led them east for 3 days. It was an easy path, easier than the salt plain, easier than the burning town, and for a time, Yusuf allowed himself to believe they had left the worst behind. The water was clean and plentiful, and fish swam in the shallows. Tariq caught two with his hands, laughing when they slipped through his fingers. They roasted them over a small fire and ate in silence, watching the sun set over the canyon walls. But on the fourth day, the river ended. It did not taper or fade. It simply stopped, plunging over the edge of a cliff into a gorge so deep that Yusuf could not see the bottom. Mist rose from the depths, and the sound of falling water echoed like distant thunder. "Now what?" Tariq asked, staring at the drop. Yusuf looked left and right. The gorge stretched in both directions, a great scar cutting through the land. There was no way down, or at least no way down that would not kill them. "There is a crossing," Sahar said. 2 miles north, a city built across the gorge. You will find your path there." "A city?" Yusuf repeated. "You will see." They found it as the sun was setting. At first, Yusuf thought it was a trick of the light, shadows and mist playing across the gorge. But as they drew closer, the shapes resolved into something impossible. A city built on ropes. It hung suspended across the gorge, a web of bridges and platforms and swaying walkways, all lashed together with rope and timber. Buildings clung to the canyon walls on either side, connected by rope bridges so narrow that only one person could cross at a time. Lanterns hung from the ropes, swaying in the wind, casting golden light into the mist below. It was beautiful and terrifying. "People live here?" Tariq whispered. "Apparently," Yusuf said. They descended a steep path to the canyon's edge, where the city began. A gate stood at the entrance, or rather, the start of the first bridge, guarded by a woman with a spear and a bored expression. "Toll," she said. Yusuf reached into his satchel and found a few small coins, the last of his money. He handed them over. The woman examined them, shrugged, and stepped aside. "Don't run on the bridges, don't cut the ropes, and don't look down if you're afraid of heights." "Comforting," Yusuf muttered. They stepped onto the first bridge. It swayed immediately, and Tariq grabbed Yusuf's arm with a strangled gasp. The bridge was perhaps 3 feet wide, made of wooden slats lashed together with rope. The gaps between the slats were wide enough to see through, to see the mist and the abyss below. "Don't look down," Yusuf said, echoing the guard's advice. "Too late," Tariq squeaked. They crossed slowly, step by careful step. The bridge swayed with every movement, and the wind tugged at their clothes. Halfway across, Yusuf made the mistake of looking down. The mist roiled far below, and for a moment he thought he saw shapes moving in it, vast and slow, like the shadows of ancient things. He looked away quickly and focused on the far side. They reached the first platform, a small square of wood and stone clinging to the canyon wall. From there, another bridge led to another platform, and another. The city was a maze of swaying paths, each one leading deeper into the web. "How do people live like this?" Tariq asked, his voice shaking. "Carefully," Yusuf said. They found an inn, if it could be called that, on a platform near the center of the city. It was a single-room structure with a rope floor and walls made of woven mats. The innkeeper was a wiry man with arms like knotted rope and a smile that showed too many teeth. "Welcome, travelers," he said. "A night's stay is 2 coppers. Food is extra. And if you fall off a bridge, we're not responsible." Yusuf paid for the room and a bowl of stew that tasted of fish and salt. They ate in silence, listening to the creak of ropes and the distant roar of the waterfall. "Why did we come here?" Tariq asked quietly. "Because the next gate is here," Yusuf said. "Not just the gate," Sahar's voice said in his mind. "Your hunters are here too." Yusuf nearly dropped his spoon. "What?" They crossed the salt plain faster than I expected, and they have followed your trail to the river. They are here, in the city, looking for you. How many? 3, the tracker and 2 enforcers. They arrived this morning. Yusuf set down his spoon. His appetite was gone. What do we do? He asked quietly. You have 2 choices, Sahar said. Hide and hope they do not find you, or draw them out and deal with them. I'm not a fighter. No, Sahar agreed. But you are clever, and this city is a trap for those who do not know its ways. Yusuf thought for a moment. Then he stood. Tariq, stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Where are you going? To end this. Yusuf found the hunters near the central market, a platform where traders sold dried fish and rope and tools. The tracker was questioning a merchant, showing him something. A coin, perhaps, or a description. The 2 enforcers stood behind him, arms crossed. Yusuf stepped into view. The tracker saw him immediately. His eyes narrowed, and he said something to the enforcers. They turned, and one of them pointed. Yusuf ran. He did not run toward the inn. He ran deeper into the city, across the narrow bridges, toward the most dangerous part of the web. He knew the hunters would follow. They had come too far to give up now, and he was counting on it. Behind him he heard shouts and the thud of boots on wood. The bridges here were older, less maintained. Some of the slats were missing. The ropes were frayed. Yusuf leaped over gaps, his heart hammering, and did not look back. He reached a bridge that swayed more than the others, a long, narrow span with ropes so worn they looked ready to snap. He stopped in the center and turned. The 3 hunters were on the far side, breathing hard. The tracker stepped onto the bridge first, his face set with grim determination. Give me the key, he called, and we let you go. I don't believe you, Yusuf said. The tracker smiled. Smart man. He took another step forward. The bridge swayed. Now, Sahar said. Yusuf reached into his satchel and pulled out his chisel. With one swift motion, he struck the rope support near his feet. The rope was old, frayed, and it parted with a snap. The bridge lurched. The tracker's eyes went wide. He grabbed for the ropes, but it was too late. The bridge tilted sharply, spilling him sideways. He fell with a scream that was swallowed by the mist below. The 2 enforcers stopped on the far side, their faces pale. Next, Yusuf said. His voice was steady, though his hands were shaking. The enforcers looked at each other. Then they turned and walked away. Yusuf stood on the broken bridge for a long moment, breathing hard. Then he carefully made his way back to solid ground. Well done, Sahar said. You used the city against them. That was clever. I killed a man, Yusuf said quietly. You defended yourself, Sahar corrected. There is a difference. Yusuf was not sure he believed her, but he was alive, and the hunters were gone. That would have to be enough. He returned to the inn to find Tariq safe and asleep. Yusuf sat by the window and looked out at the swaying city, the lanterns flickering in the dark. The 3rd gate is close, Sahar said. It will appear tomorrow, at dawn. Be ready. What will it ask of me? Your name, Sahar said. Your true name, not the one you were given, but the one you have earned. Yusuf did not understand, but he was too tired to ask. He lay down beside Tariq and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, the 3rd gate. Djinn Chapter 8. 3rd Gate of Names, the Market. Without faces, dawn came cold and pale over the rope city. Yusuf woke to the sound of the wind threading through the bridges, a low moan that never quite stopped. Tariq was still asleep, curled beneath his thin cloak, and Yusuf let him rest. The boy had been through enough. Yusuf stepped out onto the platform and looked east. The sun was rising over the far rim of the canyon. painting the mist below in shades of gold and rose. It was beautiful, and it made his chest ache in a way he could not name. "The gate will appear soon," Sahar's voice said. "Are you ready?" "No," Yusuf said honestly. "Good. If you were ready, it would mean you had not understood what is at stake." Yusuf did not ask what she meant. He simply waited, watching the light spread across the city. And then he saw it. In the center of the city, where the largest platform stood, a wide square where the merchants gathered each morning, the air began to shimmer. Not with heat, but with something else. A distortion, like a ripple on still water. And slowly, impossibly, a new structure began to appear. It was a marketplace, but not like any Yusuf had ever seen. The stalls were made of shadow and silk, and the merchants who stood behind them had no faces. Or rather, their faces were there, but they were blank, smooth as river stones without eyes or mouths. They moved like living people, gesturing and handling goods, but they made no sound. Yusuf felt a chill run down his spine. "The market without faces," Sahar said. "It appears only to those who carry the key. It is a place of exchange, but not of coin. Here you trade truths, secrets, names." "I don't want to trade anything," Yusuf said. "Then you will not pass the third gate," Sahar said simply. "The gate of names will not open unless you speak your truth. Not the name you were given, not the name others call you, but the name you have earned through your choices." Yusuf stared at the market. "I don't understand." "You will," Sahar said. "Go, walk among the stalls, and when you are asked, answer." Yusuf woke Tariq, and together they descended the swaying bridges to the central platform. The market was already crowded with travelers. Or at least, it seemed crowded. But when Yusuf looked closer, he realized that the other people in the market were not quite real. They moved stiffly like puppets, and their faces were blurred. Only the faceless merchants were solid, and they were watching him. Yusuf walked slowly through the stalls. Each one sold something different. One had piles of silk that shimmered in colors that did not exist. Another had jars of light, sealed and glowing. Another had books whose pages turned themselves. But none of it felt real. It felt like a dream or a test. He stopped at a stall where a faceless merchant stood behind a low table. On the table was a single object, a wooden box, small and plain, with a latch made of bone. The merchant gestured to the box. Yusuf looked at it. "What's inside?" The merchant did not answer, could not answer. But Yusuf heard a voice anyway, not spoken aloud, but whispered directly into his mind. "What you seek, what you fear, what you will become." "I don't want it," Yusuf said. The merchant gestured again, more insistently. "To pass you must open it, and when you open it, you must name what you see." Yusuf's hand trembled as he reached for the box. His fingers touched the latch and it opened with a soft click. Inside was a mirror, but it did not show his reflection. Instead, it showed a figure, tall and thin, with calloused hands and a face lined with care. The figure was carving something from wood, and Yusuf recognized the motion of the hands, the angle of the blade. It was him, or rather, it was what he had been. But as he watched, the figure changed. The hands grew steadier. The face grew harder. The wood beneath the blade became something beautiful. A box, carved with intricate patterns. The kind of work Yusuf had always dreamed of making, but had never had the time or the courage to attempt. And then the figure looked up, and Yusuf saw his own eyes staring back at him. The merchant gestured a third time. "Name what you see." Yusuf opened his mouth, and for a moment he did not know what to say. He thought of the name his father had given him. Yusuf, son of Tariq. He thought of the name the people of Baghdad had used, the woodcarver, the debtor, the man who ran. But those were not the names the gate wanted. He looked at the figure in the mirror again, at the steady hands, the hard-won skill, the choices that had brought him from the burning shop to this swaying city above a canyon. And he spoke. "I am the man who stayed when he could have run," Yusuf said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "I am the man who saved the child in the fire. I am the man who gave water freely. I am the man who will not leave those who trust me." The mirror shimmered. The figure inside it smiled, just barely, just enough, and then dissolved into light. The merchant bowed, and behind him, carved into the air itself, was a doorway. The Gate of Names. "Well spoken," Sahar said, and her voice was warm. "You have named yourself truly, and the gate has opened." Yusuf turned to Tariq. "Come on." They walked through the gate together. The world tilted and spun, and for a moment, Yusuf felt like he was falling. Then his feet touched solid ground, and the dizziness passed. They were standing on a road, a real road, paved with stone and lined with trees. The air was warm and smelled of dust and distant rain. Behind them, the gate was already fading, a shimmer of light that collapsed into nothing. Tariq looked around, his eyes wide. "Where are we?" "I don't know," Yusuf said. He looked up and down the road. It was empty, stretching into the distance in both directions. "But we're through. That's 3 gates now." "Yes," Sahar said. "And each gate you pass weakens the binding on me. I can feel it, the weight of the old words growing lighter." "How much longer?" Yusuf asked. 4 more gates," Sahar said, "and each will be harder than the last. But you are strong, Woodcarver, stronger than you know." Yusuf did not feel strong. He felt tired and scared and very far from home, but he was still alive. And Tariq was still with him. "Where do we go now?" he asked. "East," Sahar said. "Always east. The 4th gate is 3 days from here, in the glass hills, where the sand has turned to stone and the earth cuts like a blade." Yusuf sighed. "Of course it is." They began to walk. Chapter 9, The Glass Hills and the Scorpion Oasis. The road east led them through country that grew harsher with every mile. The trees gave way to scrub, then to bare rock. The soil turned red and cracked, and the air shimmered with heat that made distant shapes waver and dance. By the 2nd day, they had left the road behind and were picking their way across broken ground, following Sahar's quiet directions. On the 3rd day, they reached the glass hills. Yusuf had thought the name was a metaphor. It was not. The hills rose before them like frozen waves, black and glittering, their surfaces smooth as polished stone. But they were not stone. They were glass, or something like glass, volcanic stone that had been melted and cooled into sharp, fractured edges. The ground was treacherous, every step threatening to slice through the soles of his worn sandals. Tariq stopped at the base of the first hill and stared. "How do we cross this?" "Carefully," Yusuf said. They began to climb. The glass cut their hands and feet with every misstep, and more than once Yusuf had to stop to wrap a strip of cloth around a bleeding wound. The sun was merciless, reflecting off the black glass and turning the air into an oven. Yusuf's vision swam. His mouth was dry as sand. "There is an oasis ahead," Sahar said. "Half a day's walk. If you can reach it, you will find water." "If," Yusuf muttered. "The oasis is not empty," Sahar said. "But it is your best chance." They pressed on. The hills seemed endless, each crest revealing another stretch of black glass, another impossible climb. Tariq stumbled and fell, and Yusuf had to haul him up, ignoring the sharp pain in his own legs. By the time the sun began to sink, they were both bleeding and exhausted. And then, at the base of the final hill, Yusuf saw it. A splash of green in the blackness, a cluster of palms surrounding a pool of water. The Oasis. They stumbled down the slope and collapsed at the water's edge. Yusuf drank deeply, ignoring Sahar's warning. The water was cool and clean, the best thing he had ever tasted. Tariq drank until he choked, then drank some more. "We made it," the boy gasped. "Yes," Yusuf said, and then he saw the tracks. They were everywhere, pressed into the soft earth around the pool. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all leading away from the water and into the grass. They were small, segmented, claw-shaped. Scorpions. "Do not go into the grass," Sahar said urgently. "Not until dawn. The scorpions here are not like the ones you know. They are larger and they hunt at night. If you stay by the water, they will leave you alone, but if you wander, you will not survive." Yusuf looked at the grass. It was tall and thick, swaying gently in the evening breeze, and now that he was looking for them, he could see shapes moving within it. Dark, low to the ground, with tails arched like question marks. Hundreds of them. "We'll stay by the water," Yusuf said quietly. They sat with their backs to a palm tree and did not move. The sun set and the air grew cold. The stars came out, impossibly bright, and the sound of the scorpions moving through the grass was like the whisper of wind through dry leaves. Tariq shivered. "I'm afraid." "So am I," Yusuf admitted. "What if they come for us? Then we fight." "You cannot fight them," Sahar said. "There are too many, but I can help." "What's the cost?" Yusuf asked. Sahar was silent for a moment. "No cost this time," Sahar said, and there was something strange in her voice. Not coldness, but something softer. "You have earned this. 3 gates passed. 3 times you chose rightly. Let me protect you tonight, not as a bargain, as a companion." Yusuf did not know what to say to that, so he simply nodded. The wind began to rise. It was gentle at first, just a breath, stirring the grass. But it grew stronger, circling the oasis in a slow spiral. The scorpions in the grass hesitated, their tails lowering. The wind pressed against them, not hard enough to harm, but firm enough to turn them back. They retreated, slowly, reluctantly. They withdrew into the darkness beyond the grass, leaving a circle of empty ground around the water. Tariq stared. "She did that?" "Yes," Yusuf said. "Is she always watching us?" Yusuf looked down at the key, warm against his palm. "I think so." "Sleep," Sahar said. "I will keep watch." And for the first time since leaving Baghdad, Yusuf felt safe enough to close his eyes. He woke to daylight and the sound of Tariq's laughter. The boy was standing at the edge of the pool, watching something in the water. Yusuf sat up, his body aching, and joined him. In the pool, beneath the clear surface, fish swam in lazy circles. They were small and silver, catching the morning light. It was such an ordinary sight, so peaceful, that for a moment Yusuf forgot about the gates and the hunters and the road ahead. "We should go," he said finally. Tariq nodded, but as they gathered their things, the boy turned back to look at the oasis one more time. "Will we ever stop running?" he asked. Yusuf wanted to lie, to tell the boy that everything would be fine, but he had learned that lies had weight, and Tariq deserved better. "I don't know," Yusuf said, "but we'll keep going until we find a place where we don't have to run anymore." Tariq seemed satisfied with that. They left the oasis and began to climb the glass hills again, heading east toward the next gate. Behind them, the wind that had protected them in the night faded to nothing, but its memory lingered, warm and strange. By midday they reached the far side of the glass hills. The land beyond was barren and flat, a plain of red sand that stretched to the horizon. The heat was brutal, but at least the ground was no longer trying to cut them. They walked through the afternoon without speaking, conserving energy. The sun hammered down. Yusuf's lips cracked, his vision blurred. And then, in the distance, he saw movement. At first he thought it was a mirage, figures wavering in the heat. But as they drew closer, the shapes resolved into something real. A caravan, not a large one, perhaps 20 people, a dozen camels, a few wagons loaded with goods. They were stopped in the shade of a rock outcropping, resting during the worst heat of the day. Yusuf approached cautiously. A guard saw them and called out. An older man emerged from the shade, a caravan master by the look of him, weathered and sharp-eyed. "Travelers?" the man said. "Alone?" "Yes," Yusuf said. The caravan master looked them over, the torn clothes, the bandaged feet, the exhaustion in their faces. His expression softened. "You look like you've been through hell," he said. "Come, rest. We have water and bread to spare." Yusuf wanted to refuse. He had learned to be wary of charity that came too easily, but Tariq was swaying on his feet, and Yusuf's own legs felt like they might give out at any moment. "Thank you," he said. They were given water and flatbread and a place in the shade. The other travelers nodded to them but did not ask questions. It was the way of the desert. Everyone had a story, and most of those stories were best left untold. Yusuf ate slowly, savoring every bite. Beside him, Tariq fell asleep almost immediately, his head pillowed on his bundle. The caravan master sat down nearby. "Where are you headed?" "East," Yusuf said. "East is a big place." "I know." The man smiled. "Fair enough. We're headed to the river towns. 3 more days. You're welcome to travel with us if you like. Safer in numbers." Yusuf considered. It was tempting, safety, companionship, an easier road. But he thought of the gates, of the tests that lay ahead. Could he pass them while traveling with others? Would the gates even appear? "You can travel with them," Sahar said quietly. "The 4th gate is not far from their route, and you are right to be cautious. There is still danger on the road." "What kind of danger?" "The kind that follows caravans," Sahar said. "Bandits, raiders, the desperate and the cruel, but they will not attack a group this size, not unless they are foolish." Yusuf looked at the caravan master. "We'll travel with you, thank you." The man nodded. "Good. We leave at dusk when the heat breaks. Rest while you can." Chapter 10. 4th Gate of Bread. The Hunger Night Caravan. They traveled with the caravan for 2 days, and it was the easiest 2 days Yusuf had known since leaving Baghdad. The pace was steady, but not punishing. There was food and water to share. And at night, when they made camp, there were fires and stories and the comfort of voices. Tariq thrived. He played with the other children in the caravan, laughing and running between the camels. Yusuf watched him and felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, or maybe hope. But on the 3rd night, everything changed. They had made camp in a dry riverbed, sheltered by high banks on either side. It was a good spot, protected from the wind, with a few scraggly trees for shade. The caravan master posted guards and lit the fires, and the travelers settled in for the night. Yusuf was helping to unload supplies when he heard the commotion, voices raised in anger, a woman shouting. He turned and saw a crowd gathering near one of the wagons. He pushed through the crowd and saw the problem immediately. The wagon that had carried the food, the dried meat and grain and dates, had been raided, not by bandits, but by rats. The tarp that covered the supplies had been torn, and much of the food was ruined, gnawed and fouled. The caravan master stood beside the wagon, his face pale. "How much is left?" someone asked. "Not enough," the caravan master said. Maybe 2 days' worth, if we ration carefully. And we're still 3 days from the river towns. A murmur ran through the crowd. Fear, anger, desperation. We'll starve, a man said. No, the caravan master said firmly. We'll ration. Everyone gets a share. Small, but fair. We'll make it. But that night, as the portions were handed out, Yusuf saw the truth in people's faces. The portions were not enough. Not nearly enough. Hunger gnawed at them, and by morning it would be worse. He sat with his own share, a handful of grain, a scrap of dried meat, a single date. It was not much, but it was all he would get until tomorrow night. Tariq looked at his own portion, his face pinched with hunger. Is this all? The boy whispered. Yes, Yusuf said. We have to make it last. Tariq nodded and ate slowly, chewing every bite as if it were precious. Yusuf looked at his own portion. He thought of the gate of bread, of Sahar's words. The gate will not open unless you give something freely. He knew what he had to do. He stood and walked through the camp carrying his food. He found a family, a mother and 2 small children, huddled together near one of the fires. The children were crying softly, their faces thin and hollow. Yusuf knelt beside them and held out his portion. Here, he said, for the children. The mother stared at him. I can't. Please, Yusuf said. They need it more than I do. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She took the food and pressed it into her children's hands. They ate like starving animals, and Yusuf felt his own stomach twist with hunger. But he also felt something else. Lightness. Rightness. He returned to his spot by the fire and sat down. Tariq was watching him. You gave away your food, the boy said. Yes. Why? Because they needed it more. Tariq was quiet for a moment. Then he held out half of his own portion. Here, share mine. Yusuf looked at the boy and something inside him broke open. He took the food, his hands trembling. Thank you, he whispered. They ate in silence, sharing the small meal between them. It was not enough to fill their bellies, but it was enough to keep them going. And as the fire burned low and the camp settled into uneasy sleep, Yusuf felt the key grow warm against his chest. There, Sahar said softly. Do you see it? He looked up. At the edge of the camp, half hidden in shadow, was a doorway. It was carved from hunger and hope, from the space between giving and taking. The gate of bread. You gave freely, Sahar said. Not because you were told to, not because you thought it would save you, but because it was right. That is what the gate required. Yusuf looked at Tariq, asleep beside him. He thought of waking the boy, of carrying him through the gate now, while it was open, but something stopped him. The caravan, he said quietly. They're still hungry. If I leave now, I can't help them. The gate will not remain open long, Sahar warned. If you wait, you may lose your chance. Then I'll find another way, Yusuf said. I'm not leaving them like this. Sahar was silent for a long moment. You are either very brave or very foolish, she said at last. But I am beginning to think they are the same thing. The next morning, Yusuf woke to raised voices again. The caravan master was arguing with some of the men, and the argument was turning ugly. We should turn back, one man was saying. Go back to the last town, restock. That's 4 days behind us, the caravan master said. We'd starve before we got there. Then we take more than our share, another man said. The strong survive. That's the way of the desert. That's murder, the caravan master said. We share equally, or we don't share at all. The argument was on the verge of violence when Yusuf stood. Wait, he said. Everyone turned to look at him. There's another way, Yusuf said. The hills to the north. I saw green there yesterday. Trees, maybe water. If we send a small group to scout, we might find food. It's a half-day's walk, someone said. We don't have time. I'll go, Yusuf said. I'm fast. I'll be back by nightfall. The caravan master looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Take 2 others. If you find anything, signal with smoke. Yusuf gathered his things. Tariq wanted to come, but Yusuf made him stay. The boy was too weak, too tired. 2 men from the caravan volunteered, and together they set out toward the hills. The hills were farther than Yusuf had thought, and the terrain was brutal, but they pushed on, driven by desperation, and by midday they found it, a small oasis hidden in a fold of the hills. There were date palms, heavy with fruit, and a spring of clear water. It was enough, more than enough. They filled their water skins and cut down as many dates as they could carry. Then they lit a fire and sent up smoke, signaling the caravan. By evening, the caravan had arrived. There was enough food and water for everyone, not a feast, but enough to ease the hunger, to give them strength for the final push to the river towns. The caravan master clapped Yusuf on the shoulder. You saved us, he said. All of us. Yusuf shook his head. I just looked in the right direction. But that night, as they camped by the oasis, the gate of bread appeared again. It stood at the edge of the water, shimmering and patient. It waited for you, Sahar said, and there was wonder in her voice. The gate waited because you chose to save the caravan first. Yusuf looked at the gate, then at the people around him, eating, laughing, alive because of a choice he had made. I'm ready now, he said. He woke Tariq gently, said goodbye to the caravan master, and walked toward the gate. As he stepped through, he heard voices calling after him. Thanks, blessings, safe travels. He did not look back. The world dissolved into darkness and light, and when it reformed, he was standing in the ruins of an ancient building. Tariq was beside him, wide-eyed, and somewhere in the ruins, hidden in shadow, was the 5th gate. Sahar chapter 11. 5th Gate of Mercy. The Enemy in Chains. The ruins were vast and silent, a sprawl of broken columns and crumbled walls that stretched across a barren plain. The stones were old, older than Baghdad, older than the caliphates, perhaps as old as the first cities of men. They were covered in script that Yusuf could not read, languages that had died before his ancestors learned to speak. The air was still and heavy, as if the ruins held their breath. Where are we? Tariq whispered. I don't know, Yusuf said, but we should be careful. They picked their way through the rubble, following no path, guided only by instinct and Sahar's quiet directions. The sun was high overhead, but the ruins cast long shadows that seemed to move when Yusuf wasn't looking directly at them. The 5th gate is here, Sahar said, in the heart of the ruins, but you must pass through one more test first. What kind of test? You will see, Sahar said, and her voice was grave. They walked for an hour, maybe more, until they reached the center of the ruins. Here, the stones formed a kind of courtyard, open to the sky. In the center of the courtyard was a well, dry and cracked, and beside the well, chained to a broken pillar, was a man. Yusuf stopped. The man was middle-aged, his clothes torn and filthy, his face gaunt with hunger and thirst. His wrists were bound with iron chains, rusted but still strong. He looked up when he heard them approach, and his eyes widened. Please, the man rasped. Water, please. Yusuf approached slowly. Something about the man was familiar, but he could not place it. Who are you? Yusuf asked. The man licked his cracked lips. My name is Faisal. I am a merchant. Or I was before. He gestured weakly at the chains. Who did this to you? Bandits. They took everything. My goods, My money, my freedom. They left me here to die." His voice broke. "Please, I've been here 3 days. I'm dying." Yusuf looked at the chains. They were locked with a heavy iron padlock, too strong to break without tools. But he had his chisel, and the lock was old. It might be possible. He knelt and examined the lock, and then he saw the brand on the man's wrist, half hidden by the chains. It was a merchant's mark, a sigil Yusuf recognized. His blood went cold. He stood and looked at the man more carefully, the shape of the face, the set of the eyes, and suddenly he remembered. This was the merchant who had refused to pay him for the decorative panel, the one who had claimed the work was late when it was not. The merchant whose refusal had started the slow slide into debt that had brought Yusuf to Al-Khattab's door. This man had ruined him. "Do you know him?" Sahar asked quietly. "Yes," Yusuf said. His voice was flat. The merchant, Faisal, looked up at him, and recognition dawned in his eyes. His face went pale. "You," he whispered. "The woodcarver." "Yes. Faisal swallowed. I didn't know it would. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, please don't leave me here." Yusuf stared at him. He thought of the months of hunger, the humiliation of begging Al-Khattab for a loan, the fear and the running and the burning shop. All of it could be traced back to this man's refusal to pay an honest debt. "This is the test," Sahar said. "The gate of mercy. You could leave him here. You could let him die. No one would blame you. He deserves it." "He does," Yusuf said. "But the gate will not open if you do," Sahar said. "Mercy is not given to those who deserve it. That is why it is mercy." Yusuf closed his eyes. He thought of the choices he had made, to save the child in the fire, to give water freely, to share his food, to protect Tariq. All of those choices had been hard, but this was harder, because this man deserved to suffer, and part of Yusuf, a deep, dark part, wanted to let him. He opened his eyes and looked at Tariq. The boy was watching him, silent and solemn. "What would you do?" Yusuf asked. Tariq thought for a moment. "My father used to say that revenge is a poison. It kills the one who drinks it, not the one it's meant for." "Your father was wise." "He was," Tariq said, "before he stopped being wise." Yusuf looked back at Faisal. The man was weeping now, his face streaked with dirt and tears. Yusuf knelt and took out his chisel. He worked the edge into the lock, twisting and prying. The iron was old and brittle, and after a few minutes the lock broke with a sharp crack. The chains fell away. Faisal collapsed, sobbing. Thank you. I don't deserve—" "No," Yusuf said. "You don't." He stood and walked away, leaving the man in the dirt. Tariq followed. "Why did you free him?" "Because I'm not him," Yusuf said, "and I don't want to become him." Behind them, at the edge of the courtyard, a doorway shimmered into existence. The Gate of Mercy. "Well done," Sahar said, and her voice was soft. "That was the hardest choice yet, and you made it." Yusuf looked back once. Faisal was still on the ground, weeping. He would live. He would find his way out of the ruins. And perhaps, though Yusuf doubted it, he would learn something from this. But that was not Yusuf's concern anymore. He walked toward the gate, Tariq beside him, and stepped through. They emerged onto a windswept plateau. The air was thin and cold, and the sky above was a deep, cloudless blue. Behind them, the gate faded and was gone. Tariq shivered. "How many more gates?" "2, Yusuf said. "Just 2 more." "The next gate is the Gate of Truth," Sahar said, "and it is the most dangerous yet, because the truth, Woodcarver, is a blade that cuts both ways." "Where is it?" 3 days east, Sahar said. in the territory of the sand court, and there you will have to speak the truth, all of it, or you will not pass. Yusuf did not ask what would happen if he failed. He already knew. He looked out at the plateau, at the vast, empty land stretching before them. "Then we'd better keep moving," he said. And they did. Chapter 12, Sixth Gate of Truth, the Sand Court. For 3 days they walked across the plateau. It was a desolate place, wind-swept and cold at night, scorching by day. There were no trees, no water, no shelter. Only the endless expanse of rock and dust, and the sky pressing down like a weight. On the 3rd day, they saw the pillars. They rose from the plateau like teeth, tall columns of sandstone, carved by wind and time into strange, twisted shapes. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, forming a kind of forest of stone, and between them, Yusuf could see figures moving. People. "The Sand Court," Sahar said. "The tribe that lives here. They are the keepers of the Gate of Truth." "Are they dangerous?" "Only to liars," Sahar said. They approached the pillars cautiously. As they drew closer, Yusuf saw that the people were gathered in a circle around one of the largest pillars. They were dressed in robes the color of sand, their faces wrapped against the wind. At the center of the circle, 2 figures stood, a young woman and an older man, both speaking in raised voices. A trial. Yusuf and Tariq stopped at the edge of the circle. One of the robed figures turned and saw them. He gestured, and the circle opened to allow them in. The older man at the center of the circle was speaking. "Took my camel. I saw him 3 nights ago, near the well. He denies it, but I know the truth." The young woman shook her head vehemently. "I did not take your camel. I have my own. Why would I need yours?" The man who had gestured to Yusuf stepped forward. He was tall and thin, with a face like carved wood. He looked at Yusuf and Tariq, then at the trial. "You have come at an interesting time," he said. "We are holding judgment. Would you like to witness?" "Yes," Yusuf said. The tall man nodded. "Then watch and learn." He returned to the circle. In the center, near the pillar, was a shallow bowl filled with sand. The tall man, the judge, Yusuf realized, gestured to the older man. "Speak your claim again. Place your hand in the sand as you speak. If you lie, the sand will know." The older man placed his hand in the bowl. "She took my camel," he said, 3 nights ago." The sand remained still. The judge turned to the young woman. "Your turn. Place your hand in the sand and speak." The woman placed her hand in the bowl. "I did not take his camel." The sand began to move. It swirled in the bowl, slowly at first, then faster. It rose into the air, forming a shape, an image, faint but clear. A camel standing near a well, and beside it a figure. Not the young woman, someone else. The older man's face went pale. "Your son," the judge said quietly. "It was your son who took the camel, not her. You knew this, and you lied." The sand fell back into the bowl. The older man staggered backward, his face crumpling. I didn't want to believe." "You will return the camel and pay restitution," the judge said, "and you will not speak falsely in this court again. Do you understand?" The older man nodded, broken. The circle dissolved. The people returned to their tasks, and the judge approached Yusuf. "The sand court does not forgive lies," he said. "Here, the truth is all that matters. Why have you come?" "I'm looking for a gate," Yusuf said. The judge studied him. "The gate of truth." "Yes, it is here. But you cannot pass through it unless you are willing to speak the whole truth. Not just the convenient parts, not just the things that make you look good. All of it." He gestured to the bowl of sand. "Place your hand in the sand and speak. If you lie, Even once, the gate will not open, and you will not leave this place alive." Yusuf felt his stomach tighten. He looked at Tariq, then at the judge. "What do I have to say?" "The truth of who you are," the judge said. "The truth of what you have done, the truth of what you fear, all of it." Yusuf swallowed. He thought of the choices he had made, the mistakes, the moments of cowardice and pride. He thought of the fire, of the man in chains, of the food he had given away. He thought of the key at his side and the woman bound within it. He stepped forward and placed his hand in the bowl. The sand was cold and smooth beneath his palm. "My name is Yusuf ibn Tariq," he said. His voice was steady, though his heart was pounding. "I am a woodcarver. I am also a debtor, a thief of time, and a man who has run from more things than he can count." The sand remained still. "I left Baghdad because I was afraid, not just of Al-Khattab's men, but of failure, of being nothing. I have made mistakes. I have been proud when I should have been humble. I have been silent when I should have spoken." The sand began to swirl slowly. "But I have also tried to be better. I saved a child from a fire. I gave water freely. I shared my food when I was hungry. I freed a man who wronged me, because I did not want to become the kind of person who leaves others to die." The sand rose into the air, forming shapes, images of the gates he had passed, the choices he had made. "I carry a key that holds a djinn. Her name is Sahar. She is bound, and I am helping her to be free, because I believe everyone deserves a chance at freedom, even those who have made mistakes." The sand settled. The judge looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You have spoken truly," he said. "All of it, the good and the bad. The gate of truth is yours." He gestured to the largest pillar. At its base, carved into the stone, was a doorway. The gate of truth. Yusuf turned to Tariq. "Are you ready?" The boy nodded. They walked to the gate together. As Yusuf reached for it, the judge spoke one more time. "The final gate is the hardest," he said, "because it asks you to choose not what is right, but what is true. And sometimes those are not the same thing." Yusuf nodded. He did not fully understand, but he knew he would. He stepped through the gate. The world dissolved into light and wind, and when it reformed, they were standing on the edge of a great desert. The sky was a deep, burning orange, and the air shimmered with heat. But ahead, barely visible through the haze, was a line of green. An oasis, or a city. Yusuf could not tell. "The seventh gate," Sahar said, and her voice was different now, tight, strained. "The boundary of wind. It is close. One more day." "And then?" Yusuf asked. "And then you choose," Sahar said. "My freedom, or something else. I do not know which you will choose, and I find that frightens me." Yusuf did not answer. He simply began to walk, Tariq beside him, toward the distant green and the final gate. Chapter 13. Seventh Gate of Return, the Boundary of Wind. They reached the edge of the green as the sun was setting. It was not an oasis, and it was not a city. It was something else entirely. A boundary. The desert ended in a sharp line, as if drawn by a knife. On one side, red sand and stone and scorching heat. On the other, green grass and flowering trees, and a gentle breeze that smelled of rain and growing things. The line between them was perfect, unnatural, impossible. And standing in the middle of that line, neither in the desert nor in the green, was a figure. She was tall and slim, her form no longer made of smoke and shimmer, but of solid flesh and bone. Her hair was dark as a moonless night, and her eyes were the color of amber. She wore robes of wind and sand, and she stood with the stillness of one who has waited for a very long time. Sahar. Not the voice in his mind, not the presence in the key, but the woman herself, whole and real. Yusuf stopped. Tariq gasped. "You're free," Yusuf said. "Not yet," Sahar said. Her voice was the same, low and clear, but it carried weight now, presence. "The seventh gate stands before me, but I cannot pass through it, not without you." She gestured, and Yusuf saw it. A doorway carved into the air itself, at the exact point where the desert met the green. It shimmered like water, like heat, like the edge of a dream, the gate of return. "This is the final gate," Sahar said, "the last threshold. If you open it, I will be free, truly free. The binding will break, and I will be able to leave this place, to return to the lands of my people, to live as I was meant to live." Yusuf looked at the gate, then at Sahar. "What do you need me to do?" "Walk through the gate," Sahar said, "and as you do, choose. Choose whether my freedom is worth the cost." "What cost?" Sahar's expression flickered, something that might have been pain or regret. "The key has carried you through 6 gates. It has protected you, guided you, saved you. But its power comes from the binding, from the cage that holds me. If I am freed, the key will lose its magic. It will become just ivory and script, just a thing." She stepped closer. "And there is more. The gate is a threshold between worlds. If you pass through it with me, you will walk the path I walk. You will return to your world, yes, but not to Baghdad, not to the life you knew. The gate will take you somewhere else, somewhere you are needed, somewhere you can build a new life, but it will not be the old one." Yusuf felt the weight of her words settle over him like a shroud. "And if I don't go through with you?" he asked. "Then I remain bound," Sahar said. "The key remains powerful, and you can use it to return to Baghdad, to reclaim your old life, to face Al-Khattab and clear your name. You will have all the tools you need to survive and thrive." She paused. "But I will still be a prisoner, and the gates will close forever." Yusuf looked down at Tariq. The boy was staring at Sahar, his eyes wide with wonder and fear. "What do you think?" Yusuf asked him. Tariq bit his lip. I think she helped us. She saved us. More than once." "She did." "Then I think we should help her," Tariq said. "Even if it's hard." Yusuf smiled despite himself. The boy had learned well. He turned back to Sahar. "If I free you, what happens to the favors I owe?" "They are forgiven," Sahar said. "You will owe me nothing, and I will owe you everything." Yusuf thought of Baghdad, of his small shop, his tools, the narrow streets he had known all his life. He thought of the debts, the fear, the smallness of the life he had been living, and he thought of the road he had walked, the fire, the salt plain, the rope city, the glass hills, the choices he had made, the person he had become. He looked at the green beyond the boundary, and he knew what his choice would be. "I'm going through," he said, "with you, and I'm setting you free." Sahar's eyes widened. For a moment she looked almost human, vulnerable, hopeful, afraid. "You are certain?" "Yes." "Why?" Yusuf smiled. "Because freedom is not something you earn. It's something you deserve, and you've been caged long enough." Sahar stared at him. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was a real smile, warm and bright, and it transformed her face. "Thank you," she said. "Woodcarver, Yusuf, thank you." She turned to the gate and raised her hand. The key at Yusuf's side grew warm, then hot, then blazing. He pulled it from his sash and held it out. The calligraphy along its surface flared with light, the ancient script unraveling and dissolving into golden sparks. The gate shuddered, and then it opened. Beyond it, Yusuf could see nothing, just light, pure, white, endless light. Sahar took a step toward it. Then she stopped and looked back at Yusuf and Tariq. "Will you walk with me?" she asked. "Just for a moment? So I am not alone when I pass through?" "Yes," Yusuf said. He took Tariq's hand. Sahar took his other hand, and together the three of them stepped through the gate of return. The light swallowed them whole. For a long moment there was nothing, no sound, no sensation, no sense of self, just the light, vast and infinite and impossibly bright. And then gently the world began to reform. Yusuf felt solid ground beneath his feet. He felt wind on his face, cool and clean. He heard birdsong and the rustle of leaves and the distant sound of water. He opened his eyes. They were standing in a valley, green and lush, with a river running through its center. The sky above was blue and clear, and the air smelled of spring. In the distance, Yusuf could see a town, small but prosperous, with fields and orchards and smoke rising from chimneys. Tariq was beside him, staring in wonder, and Sahar stood a few paces away, her form solid and whole. The wind played with her hair and she was laughing, not the cold, knowing laugh of a djinn, but the free, unguarded laugh of someone who has been given back their life. "I'm free," she whispered. "I'm really free." She turned to Yusuf and her eyes were wet with tears. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Yusuf nodded. He did not trust himself to speak. Sahar looked at the valley, at the sky, at the world that was now open to her. "I must go," she said, "back to my people, back to the lands of wind and fire. But I will not forget you, Yusuf ibn Tariq, and if you ever have need of me, if you ever call my name in the wind, I will come." "I know," Yusuf said. Sahar smiled one last time. Then she turned and began to walk. As she walked, her form began to shimmer, to dissolve into wind and light. By the time she reached the far side of the valley, she was gone, but the wind remained, warm and gentle, like a blessing. Yusuf stood in the valley for a long time, watching the sky. Tariq stood beside him, silent and solemn. Finally, the boy spoke. "Where are we?" "I don't know," Yusuf said, "but I think this is where we're supposed to be." He looked down at his hand. The key was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer warm, no longer glowing. It was just ivory, smooth and cool and ordinary. But it was still beautiful, and it was still a reminder of what he had done, the choices he had made. He put the key in his satchel. "Come on," he said to Tariq. "Let's see what this place is." They walked down the valley, toward the town. As they drew closer, they saw people working in the fields, children playing by the river. No one looked at them with suspicion or fear. They were just travelers, like any others. And when they reached the town, they found an inn and a meal and a warm bed. That night, as Yusuf lay in the dark, he thought of Baghdad. He thought of his old life, the debts and the fear and the small, cramped workshop. He did not miss it. He thought of the gates and the tests and the choices that had brought him here. And he thought of Sahar, free at last, walking the lands of wind and fire. And he closed his eyes and slept. And for the first time in months, he did not dream of running. Epilogue: The Woodcarver and the Open Road. 6 months later, Yusuf stood in the doorway of his new workshop and looked out at the valley. It was a good workshop, small but well built, with a window that caught the morning light and a door that opened onto the sound of the river. He had built it himself, with help from Tariq and some of the townspeople. They had been kind, these people in this valley whose name he still did not know, and they had given him work. A chest here, a table there, prayer beads for the mosque. His hands remembered the work, and slowly, carefully, He was building a new life. Tariq lived with him now. The boy had nowhere else to go, and Yusuf had no desire to send him away. They were family now, not by blood, but by choice, and that was enough. Yusuf was carving a panel for a merchant in the town. A decorative piece, intricate and beautiful. It was the kind of work he had always wanted to do, but had never had the time or the courage to attempt. He worked slowly, carefully, letting the wood speak to him. And as he worked, he thought of the gates and the tests and the woman made of wind who had walked with him through fire and sand and darkness. He thought of her often, and sometimes when the wind blew through the valley in a certain way, warm and gentle, carrying the scent of distant places, he thought he heard her voice. "Thank you, Woodcarver, for everything." He would smile and return to his work, and the world would turn, as it always had and always would. But Yusuf was no longer running. He was no longer afraid. He was free. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. The end.